Why did it happen? Now, I first want to touch on what you'll probably hear in college, right? What are a lot of, uh, you know when I say academia? Remember what I talked about in the 1920s, the intellectuals, and then it trickles down to us bottom dwellers, the ideas. Um, what will a lot of people in academia and the media, so academia, college professors, intellectuals, okay, the media, who are the media? What do you think, Michael? When I say the media, what do I mean? Okay, fake news. Okay, so news, but that's not all. Who sets our ideas about how the world works? The news. Who else? Where do Americans get their ideas of how history? Yeah, entertainment, like movies, right? Radio, stuff like that. Okay, media, academia. Who do you think they're going to blame for the Great Depression? Who? Who's that? What'd you say? Remember these guys? Oh, the evil robber barons, right? We love to blame those guys. So, one college AP Advanced Placement textbook, the way it puts it, of course, it says it's the fault of the rich. Concentration of wealth, right? So the rich got too much of the wealth, too big of a percentage of the wealth. Well, how is that going to hurt everybody? How is that going to cause a Great Depression? Well, they would say the rich, when they get so much of the wealth, you give it to poor people, what are they going to do with it? They're going to spend it, right? But they said too much of the rich got too much of the money, or the rich got too much of the money, and decided not to save, not to spend it or invest. Okay, those companies that the rich are not spending money with. Okay, they're not buying stuff from them, they're not investing. What are those companies? If they don't get enough money, what are they going to have to do with their workers? Yeah, fire them. Now, those workers who got fired, what can they not do anymore? Yeah, they can't buy stuff. Now, the companies they were going to buy from, what are they going to have to do now they're not getting so much money? What are they going to do with their workers? Fire them. Then what are those workers not going to be able to do? So it's this downward spiral that began with, so you know what, it's greed. We love it to be greed, right? And you see how that gives all the social justice warriors out there something to get angry about. Let's go fight the man, right? Okay. Now, what's the problem with this? I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this. We could talk a long time about it. But let's stop and think about this. The question is, why did it happen now as opposed to some other time? I mean, did greed just pop up out of nowhere? All of a sudden, people got greedy in 1929. Now, remember Deidre McCloskey, I talked about the Industrial Revolution? Did people like to say the Industrial Revolution happened because of exploitation, right? Europe exploited other countries, took their stuff, and used that to make the Industrial Revolution. What's the problem with that? Did Europe come up with the idea of exploitation around the year 1800? Had nobody ever exploited before? Okay, that's a simple one. People have been exploiting as long as there's been people, right? Well, then why didn't the Industrial Revolution happen earlier? Because it's something else. It's not. Yeah, there was exploitation, but that didn't explain enough because there's been exploitation elsewhere without an Industrial Revolution. So if there's been greed before, and there have been plenty of times when there was a greater concentration of wealth than we saw in 1929, more of the wealth of the country, a higher percent going to a smaller group of people, the rich, and we didn't have a Great Depression. You all with me? We could get more into the weeds, but here I'm going to try to focus not on what is wrong, but what I think really did cause the Great Depression. Okay? Now, one more question. One more point. A lot of people are going to say, also, whom do they think could have saved us from this? Okay, well, who are these guys? They're in some kind of parade riding along in the back of a Reynolds Wrights FDR. Okay, they'll give you it. This is 1933. What happened in 1932? Why is one guy really happy? What happened? What did FDR do in 1932? Why is he going on parade? He became what? He got elected. Okay, so now it's the inauguration. Who's the guy sitting next to him? Former president. Whom do people tend to blame the Great Depression on? Herbert Hoover. That's right. Okay, so what a lot of people will say, you're going to hear the kind of myth that's out there is, oh, remember we talked about in the 1920s, those fundamentalists? Okay, people who have what? What are they, instead of reason? Faith, right? Okay, well, just like those fundamentalists who had faith in God, a leap into the dark, as they would say, those Republicans had blind faith in the free market. And so they'll quote the first Republican president of the 20s, Harding, when he said, the business of America is business. Okay? Which I kind of like that saying. And that is fine, isn't it? Okay. And then they will show this, they'll think of Hoover in this picture. And when what should have happened, there was look at the picture on the left. What could the government do to solve this problem on the left? Yeah, what could they? And if the problem was the rich have all the money and they're not spending it, so the economy won't go anywhere, what could we get the government to do? Yeah, tax, take money from the rich and do what? Yeah, spend it. Find some way to spend it. That'll get the economy going. But these mindless Republicans who have this blind faith in the free market refuse to do what's necessary. Okay, Hoover and these other Republicans won't do what it takes to get the economy going, and then it takes FDR to come save us, getting the government to come in and start the economy up because he cared enough. Right? By the way, is that really what's going to you want to vote for a president who cares? How about a president with a clue, right? Because guess what? The president doesn't know you. I hate to break it to your feelings. I know it may trigger you, but the president does not know you. Are you triggered, Amanda? OMGSH. Okay, so now we're going to find out. Guess who actually caused the Great Depression? The government. Why did it stay so bad so long? Guess. The government. Okay, and it turns out actually Hoover did more than anybody had ever done to have the government try to save us. And that messed things up. Remember the 1920 to 21 recession? How did we get out of that? Cutting government. Okay, more on that later. Okay. So, now we're going to talk about really why did it happen? Why did the Great Depression happen? And to understand that, we have to understand, Blake, could somebody nudge Blake for me? There we go. We've got to understand the connection between, focus with me, everybody look at me, the money supply, okay, and the economy. Monetary policy. What's the money supply? Very simple. Okay, the first word you can say is money, right? How much money there is floating around the economy. That's the money supply. So monetary policy is decisions of how much money we're going to have floating around up there. Okay? And so the money supply affects the economy. The boom, and what follows the boom? Another B. Create a bubble, what happens? Pops. The boom and bust. We got to understand the connection between the money supply and boom and bust to understand the Great Depression. Okay? When the government, okay, so let's think about this. What guides the economy? Do we just have really smart people telling everybody what to do? The problem is we don't have enough smart people and they don't care enough, and that's why the economy doesn't do well enough. What prices? Prices send signals. How do businesses know what to make? They look at the price. How do they know what to make it with? They look at the price of the materials, right? Okay, well, how much should people borrow? You're a business. You're thinking, should I expand my business or not? How are you going to decide? You're going to borrow money. What is the price for borrowing money? Anybody know? If you want to borrow money, you got to pay back plus what? What's that? So I know it's a little weird to think of it this way, but it's true. What is the price of money? The price of money is interest rates. So if interest rates are higher, what will businesses do? They will borrow. If interest rates are lower, they will borrow. Okay. Now, to get this across, and then if they borrow a lot because interest rates are low, what will businesses do? They'll borrow a lot, they'll expand, and as they're expanding, right, they're hiring people to do the expansion, to make things, and those guys can buy stuff. What's happened with the economy? It's growing, it's booming. But eventually, you've been encouraged to make, if you make too much stuff, if you get too excited because the interest rates are artificially low, you create a bubble and bubbles pop. Now, to get that idea across, we're going to use an analogy. Okay, let's say, here you go, you're Joe Snuffy, and you're thinking of making a house. Before you make a house, what's the first thing you need to know? Okay, what else? What if you've already got your materials? You need to know, how, well, how to build a house. You have to know how many bricks, right? You got to know how many bricks you've got. If you have the wrong idea of how many bricks you've got, you think, here's Joe Stuffy, he thinks, man, I got a whole lot of bricks. So what kind of house is he going to build? So yeah, that's right. I'm going to build me Biltmore. Okay? I'm going to build a huge, now, he's going to get started. Will he know instantly that he didn't have enough bricks? No. He's going to start building, so he's going to start building just, the bottoms of the wall, but eventually what's going to happen? He ran out of bricks. And guess what? Now, remember, what do people need? They need wealth. Wealth is stuff they value. These bricks, are they doing them any good at all? They've been wasted. Do we have an unlimited number of bricks? So if we use it to make stuff we don't need, it's waste. Now, wouldn't it be better? See, that's what progressives say, well, let's just do everything. Why don't we just make things better? Yeah, but if you disconnect from reality, you end up wasting stuff. And if you say, well, you know what, we don't have that much, you say, oh, you just don't care enough. Okay, well, wouldn't it have been better to think about, see, if he looks at, this is all I've got, so I can't produce that giant house. So he lowers his sights, but he has something that really does help. It's not as great as Biltmore, but he couldn't afford a Biltmore. He could afford a tiny house, which would be kind of cool. Wouldn't it be nice to have a tiny house? Although, they're actually just trailers, but they look kind of cool. Okay, so if he had started with a picture of reality, he could have built a house with the bricks he's got that fits his needs. Y'all with me? So how does this apply? How does this analogy apply to the economy at large? Let's see. Okay, who's that? That's an entrepreneur. So what's the light bulb represent? What's in the briefcase? Yeah, money. Okay. Now, the entrepreneur's trying to figure out, what do people want? Want a car, cell phone, tablet. What do they want? He says, oh, they want a house. So it's the entrepreneur that makes stuff for the people, right? What do they make stuff out of? Okay, what else? What else does it take to make stuff? Okay, yeah, workers. How are you going to get it? Remember, Henry Ford, before he could build the conveyor belt, what did he need? What do we call money? That's right. The entrepreneur puts all this stuff together. And again, what is the entrepreneur going to look to decide how much can I expand? How big can I make my factory? The price of money. What's the price of money? Okay. Now, when we talk about it, we talk about money moving around, but money is just pieces of paper. However, let's think about There are two ways we can decide what interest rates are going to be. Okay? Where does money that you're going to loan out, where does it come from? It comes from the bank, right? But where do banks get it? Michael, you with me? Okay, did y'all hear what he said? Where do banks get their money? From people saving it. What are the two things you can do with your money? You can save it or you can spend it. Now, you're just thinking of a piece of paper moving around and electronic credits in your bank account, but how does that connect with the real economy? Okay? Well, if you are spending your money, right? So here's Joe and Jane Tentpeg sitting in their living room, and they decide to buy some stuff. Now their money has been put into consumer goods. These are not used to make other goods. These are end products. Are you going to make something, produce something with that armchair? No. Okay? Notice where their money did not go. Where did it not go? It's to the bank. So how much money has been saved? None. So what will the price of money be if there's not much money saved? Okay, look at me, y'all. If you have more of something, the price will be less. If you have less of something, the price will be higher. So if people are not in the real world, if people don't save money, interest rates will be higher. Does that make sense? Okay. And that will send signals to entrepreneurs. So let's look at, though, what's happening out in the real world in the economy. Instead of just thinking of pieces of paper moving around, think of what's going on in the economy. So here Joe and Jane Tentpeg, and they buy stuff, right? And then those companies, they've got to buy resources and labor with that money. They get the resources, they get the labor, then they can make your stuff for you. So when you buy a car, you are telling the economy, when all Americans are doing this, when all Americans go out and buy a car, do we have an infinite amount of steel? So we are telling the economy, take our money, take our steel, the steel of the economy, and put it into cars. But now it's not available to put into factories or drill presses or laser beams. There we go. So now, what if instead, what just happened? They did not buy a TV. So where did their money go when they didn't buy a TV? Did y'all see it? Let's see it again. Okay? They said, no, I'm going to forego a TV. Bam. I'm going to go without a piece of furniture. I'm going to go without that radio. Y'all with me? Now, look, did the resources get used up? Okay, look at me, y'all. When you don't buy something, you are saying, take those resources, instead of putting it into consumer goods, save them up, and you can put them into industry. Does that make sense? Again, I've talked about this before. Why are Americans so productive? Because they're so highly capitalized. Money's been poured into them. You with me? Okay. So, what is the entrepreneur? What are they saying? Now, why do I have that cloud there? That cloud is kind of like students with parents, right? The job of a student is to confuse the parent. Kind of like an octopus shooting out a cloud of ink, right? So, you can't know what's going on. It's like, oh, well, I got to do some makeup and homework in my locker. Wait, what? What are you talking about? I don't understand. It's like, yeah, well, that's the goal. Okay, I'm trying to, right? All right. So the entrepreneur, how do they know what the people want and whether the people have saved or not? There's a cloud there. Can you tell what 300 million people want and what they've done? You do a Vulcan mind meld with 300 million people, right? Are you going to join the force and like, no, I'm one with the force. The force is with me. No, you can't. No, you can't do that. I'm sorry, Bobby. Can you really? I didn't know that. Okay. So, and think of it in China, it'd be even harder. They got 1 billion people. Are you going to try to find out how do entrepreneurs know what's going on? They need to look at signals. So what do they look at? Hey, is there capital? How much capital has been saved up? If the people have not saved up capital, the entrepreneur sees empty checking accounts and he thinks no resources. You with me? They decide what to do based on prices. How much money do I borrow to expand my factory? What are the prices looking like? However, there is another way we can change interest rates. So what's the first way, the natural way we can change interest rates? When people save. And if people save more, you tell me what's going to happen to interest rates. You with me? Because there's stuff to use. Sending signals, that's reality. What does the government do? Obscure reality. If the Federal Reserve, that's our national bank, if they decide to create extra money with artificial causes, okay, that's another way we can save. If they artificially forced interest rates down, they create money on their own, that's going to force interest rates down, right? But notice, it hasn't happened naturally. The people have used up the resources. They don't have any money left over, but the entrepreneur thinks the resources are there that people did save up because interest rates got pushed down. You with me? Entrepreneur sees that and thinks there's plenty available. So what does the entrepreneur do? He goes out, expands his factory, but then it turns out nobody saved up any money to buy his stuff with, right? And then there's not enough resources to do all the things he wanted because he got a distorted picture of reality. The government distorted the picture of reality by artificially changing prices, the interest rate. See what he's saying? He's thinking, oh, the people have full checking accounts, there must be plenty of resources. So here he goes. He didn't have a true map of reality, so he ended up building stuff, and we ended up building more than people could consume, and we couldn't complete our project. Now, where have we seen an example of this in your life? Who's heard of the housing bubble? Housing bubble. Yeah, what does that mean? What's a bubble? That's what it does. It pops. But what is it? We got too many. What happened with the housing bubble? With the encouragement of the Federal Reserve, banks created several trillions of dollars of additional money. They loaned it out, and on the foundation of that fake capital, the economic system was led to proceed as though corresponding new and additional physical wealth had come into being. Real resources acting made them think, hey, there's all these real resources. The result was the construction of as many as 3 million new homes that people could not pay for. Sees that and he thinks, oh, plenty of resources, full checking accounts. But in reality, there's not. Reality was not enough resources, not enough money saved up to buy those houses, that people don't have the money to buy what's been produced. That's a bubble. That's what it looks like right there. What's that? That's a nearby. Okay, you've grown up thinking that it's natural and normal to have whole areas where all the trees are chopped down and there's roads going to nothing. Right? That's been your whole life. You see this. You say, oh, yeah, it's natural. You just go chop down trees, put down roads for nothing. That's not normal, guys. It's not supposed to be like that. What happened? There's only so many $900,000 McMansions that can be bought out there. And so the Federal Reserve lowered interest rates, making businesses think, oh, people can buy lots of houses. They build lots of houses. The first ones get bought, But eventually they can't buy them all. And some people, once reality kicked in and not all those houses are getting bought, some of the builders were partway through and stopped in the middle of their project. And that's what you get. Paved Paradise put up a parking lot. That's why your world looks the way it does. The government did that by distorting reality with artificial interest rates. There you go. There's another example. But it's not just America. Who's heard of, in China, ghost cities? See that? No one lives in those buildings. Where are all the people? There's nobody there. Steve, have you heard of this? Yeah. It's just that. Now, why did this happen? They don't have the money to finish, right? But why do they not have the money to finish? Because nobody's buying the houses that they built before. See what I'm saying? Now, why did this happen? It's the same in America. It's the same. Remember what I've taught you? People are the same everywhere, essentially. These forces work the same in China as they do in America. There's some more. But wait, there is something that makes it all worthwhile. Bulldozer fights. There are these two companies. Yeah, two companies. They both wanted the right to build this building, and they started fighting over it. So maybe there's something. Okay, you want to watch? Here we go. So what we've seen is when the government creates a bunch of money, what happens to the economy? Think about this. The government creates a bunch of money. What do we see happen? At first, okay, if the government can throw a bunch of money out there, what are people going to do with that money? When they buy stuff from companies, what are those companies going to do? They're going to make things. They got to hire people to do that, right? And then those people get hired, they go buy stuff. And so the economy is booming, right? But it's an artificial boom because people didn't save up to make this happen, right? They didn't save up to buy the products. They didn't set aside the resources. So this is the government creating an artificial boom. What's another word we use for that? That artificial, a bubble. What happens to bubbles? Okay, and so when we saw the China ghost cities, remember all those buildings? Nobody was living in them. That's what government does, right? In America, we've got our own, with all these empty subdivisions that didn't get completed. So the conclusion we draw is that the key to avoiding the bust, right? The bust is when we collapse. The key to avoiding the bust is to avoid the boom that precedes it. And what makes that boom happen? Credit expansion. What's credit? When you give out people loans, right? When you expand who can get loans, again, that's what happened in our housing bubble. Government says, here's all these credits. All these people can get loans, but you got people getting loans who are not going to have the jobs to enable them to pay back those loans. You with me? So the key to avoiding the bust is to avoid the boom that comes before it, and that boom is created by an artificial expansion of credit. People at the time, what are they thinking? They think, oh, this is the good times, this is prosperity. No, you're wasting resources. Okay, you are not creating prosperity, you're wasting, because remember all those ghost cities, right? What is wealth? And that's why I need to elaborate a little more. We got used to APA. You with me? Michael? So, what is wealth? It's not just stuff, right? It's stuff people want and need, right? And they're using. If no one's living in those houses, is that wealth? But think about it. Think of all those skyscrapers, all those high-rise townhomes, okay? If people are not living in them, they're wasted, And they could have been using that for stuff, all that steel, all the energy it took to make them, all the labor could have gone into something that people would use. It got misdirected. So the Marxists are going to say it's overproduction. No, it's not overproduction. It's what do you think I mean by malproduction? Bad or misproduction, misdirected production, right? Why? Because the government intervened and messed with prices. Again, how does an economy work? What tells us what to produce? Is the thing we just need smart people telling us what to do. Prices, exactly. When was Lenin stupid? Lenin was not stupid. But being smart is not, believe it or not, being smart is not all that important, I would argue. Possibly the smartest man of the 20th century was a Nazi, Heidegger. Okay, possibly the most influential philosopher of the 20th century, Martin Heidegger, was a lot smarter than any of us, but he was deadly wrong. He was wrong. Okay, it's not as important. If you give me a choice between a society of smart people and a society of people who have this free market but just average intelligence, what would you pick? Yeah, average intelligence, but because you can connect all of them through the prices created by the free market. If you just have a bunch of smart people, they got no way of connecting. That's why Russia can crank out people with PhDs, but where do they go? They come to America because we got the free market. You with me? Lots of countries doing that. Okay, lots of continents. Let's do it. India. We get people coming here from India, from China, from Africa, from Russia. Okay, because the free market enables them to have all these opportunities. Okay, so what I'm getting at, to avoid those busts, we need to get rid of the booms. And again, think of that half-built house. That's the result. That's a symbol for the result that comes about when the government encourages production that we're not going to end up using. Up. Yeah, that John Stossel is American #1. That lady who moved here from France, really smart. Why did she move here? Because there was freedom, opportunities. And again, to make it really, to focus down on what the real issue is, you got to do, are we allowing prices to do what they want? Okay. And where do prices come from? Supply and demand. That's the free market. Okay. So, now what we're seeing is big picture. You see this chart. What you've got is a history of America's going back into the 1800s, America's ups and downs of our economy. Production. Okay? So our ups and downs of production, and what I want to point out, y'all see, can you find the Great Depression on there? Okay, you see this right here? That right there? You'll see my pointer? Okay. Now, what was this? We had this before. See these? What preceded all of these collapses? Yeah, credit expansion leading to bubbles, right? Bubbles that then pop. So the first phase, the beginning of the Great Depression was a period of boom and bust and by the way, what do we call this? The boom and bust. It's called the business cycle. A cycle is something that goes through the same phases over and over and over. Okay? Like if your washing machine, it goes through a cycle. Okay? Puts water in, spins, releases the water, or agitates, releases the water, spins to dry it out. Next load. Puts water in, agitates, lets the water out, spins through it. Same thing over and over and over. And what we see in our economic history, see, over and over, you got a boom, bust, boom, bust, boom, bust. And so the Great Depression was just the beginning of the Great Depression, just another one of those. Okay, like we saw, look at 1873 would be a big one. 1893, they used to call that the Great Depression before we had this Great Depression. Okay. In each case, the government had generated a boom through easy money. What's easy money? Throw out like artificially lower interest rates and make it a lot easier for people to get loans. Okay, easy money, easy credit, which was soon followed by the inevitable bust. So that's what we see here. Look here about, see in the 1920s, the boom time of the 20s is looking normal. Remember, there was real growth in the 20s. Why? We talked about this last year. Why was there real growth in the 20s, 1920s? What's going on to make us, when I say growth, what do I mean when I say growth? Yeah, and when I say economic growth, get away from just thinking numbers. If you just think numbers, you're going to go down the wrong path and have some bad decisions. What is the economy? People work. What are they doing? They're creating wealth, right? So why are we creating more wealth in the 1920s? What are some of the things that led to that? The automobile. We're making a lot of automobiles, and those make us more productive because you can move things around that you're producing. What's that? Yeah, the interchangeable parts and the assembly line that Henry Ford kicked in the teens is really kicking in the 1920s. Electricity. Now, we'd had electricity before, but you know when you get a new world-changing technology, it takes a while to change the world. Okay, computers and the internet. We had those in the 1980s. You know, the internet just getting started, like around the beginning of the 90s. Okay, but we didn't really know what that was going to do. Give it a couple decades, and it's changed everything. Right? Nobody foresaw Amazon. Nobody foresaw how throughout the world we could move stuff around and move credit around, and how that's just completely changed everything. And so it took a couple decades for the internet to change our economy and make us more productive. Same thing with electricity back then. Okay, so it's we had electricity, we've got it spreading throughout cities, but now by the 1920s, people figured out you can completely reorient your factory. When you've got steam, you just got one wheel turning one thing, and everybody has to coordinate around that one wheel. Now, you can have machines reorganized in whatever way makes them more efficient. And if you're more efficient, you can produce more stuff. Okay, so the 1920s had real growth. But then what happened? You see that spike at the end of the 1920s? What's going on at that spike at the end of the 20s? Yeah, around 1927, they decided to expand. Easy money. Okay? That expansion of money and credit led to rapidly rising real estate and stock prices. Okay, let's see what that's going to look like. Okay, so here we go. You got the Federal Reserve. What is the Federal Reserve? Our central bank that decides how much money there is in the economy. So, what's that? Oh my, I have no idea. That's a good question. We could just check that really easily on the internet. But okay, so if the Fed, see what's happening. Everybody watch my screen. See what the Fed's doing. Creating money. If the Fed throws money into the economy, what are people going to do with that money? Yeah, they're going to demand. Demand is you have the ability to buy and you go out to buy stuff. If we throw money into the economy, people will take it to use it. So where do they line up? They line up, for example, at those houses. And so what's going to happen when that guy's going to, well, he's going to buy a house. Everybody watch. Okay, here you go. Here's a house. Now those guys are off the market, right? They bought the house. It's off the market. But everybody else with the house is watching. They see these people lined up with money. Okay, they see all these guys with money. And they saw that house got sold. What are they going to do? What do you think they're going to do? But what are they going to ask for their house? They're going to raise their price. Does that make sense? I mean, isn't it just obvious? That's what's going to happen. So I sold it at a higher price. They disappear. So another one at a higher price. Now, as the supply of something goes down, you know all these people want to buy your house, and you know there's not that many houses left, and they've already been going for a higher price. What are you going to do? You're going to demand an even higher price. Is this making sense? Okay, and it's not just with real estate. We'd also say, what is stock, by the way? The same thing would be going on with stock. Who can tell me what is stock? Yeah, if you own stock, you own a piece of a company. Okay? If people have lots of money, what can they do? They can go buy stock. And so what's happening to the price of stock too? It's going up as well. That's why we have the stock market boom that goes bust once reality kicks in. So you create a bunch of money, it's going to go somewhere. One of the places it goes is the stock market. And we blame, okay, who do people, a lot of historians, who do they love? What do they love to blame the rich? Because what's the problem with the rich? It starts with a G. They're greedy. Okay, once again, did the rich suddenly get greedy in the 1920s? They've always been greedy. So it must have been something else that happened. How about the government creates a whole bunch of money? By the way, a lot of people today complaining about the gap between the rich and the poor, the wealth gap, right? The rich and the poor getting bigger and bigger. One of the reasons that's getting so big, do poor people own stock? No. And if the government creates a whole bunch of money and it's got no safe place, it runs to the stock market, the value of stock, the price of stock goes up, and who owns stock? Rich people. So if you think, oh, we don't want this gap between the rich and the poor, well, get the government out of stuff. Have them stop printing so much money. There's other stuff the government does to increase that gap between the rich and the poor. We'll talk about it another time. Okay, so y'all see what's going on. Prices are going up for houses. Prices are going up for stock. So let's see how we're creating a bubble. Now, who's that guy at the bottom? Entrepreneur. What is he saying? He sees the price of houses going. Entrepreneurs make the economy run. Again, who in here knows an entrepreneur? Right? What are the two main things? They make stuff, and they hire people. They create jobs, and they create stuff. They take the money, the resources, the people, mix them together to create the stuff we use. Right? How do they know what to make? Look. What does he look at? Somebody just said it. He sees the price. How do they know what to make? Prices tell them. Prices send signals. If people are willing to pay a high price, entrepreneurs say, aha, that's what the people want. I'll go make it. Y'all with me? Okay, so what's that entrepreneur going to do? Entrepreneurs, see, in a free market, a free economy, entrepreneurs decide what to do with our resources. But it's not ultimately them, it's the people. By demanding what they want, we tell the entrepreneurs. Okay, if you've got a command economy, a Marxist economy, you've got Stalin or Mao or Pol Pot in charge. They decide what happens to resources, and then people die by the tens of millions. Okay, but in a free market, the entrepreneurs do it. So he sees that price. Now, watch it. You're going to miss it. You're watching? He's going to send those resources. That steel, that energy, those workers could be used to make anything. But when he sees that price for houses go up, what is he going to turn the steel, the wood, the energy, the workers into? Houses. You with me? Only one problem. How do your parents buy a house? What do they have to do to get a house and to buy food and but not just house, food and car and cable bill. Ugh. Okay, all those things that your parents pay for. How do your parents pay for those? What do they have to do? They got to work. Okay, why do they get paid? They're producing wealth. Okay, when you buy stuff, that's called demand. Okay, but the flip side of demand is supply. You get the ability to demand stuff by supplying things to other people. Think about it. Does wanting a car, really wanting a Lexus, does that do any good to Lexus? What affects Lexus? When you really want it and you got the money to pay for it. How do you get money? By producing stuff. You with me? So this guy has cranked out houses, but the question is, did people have the high-powered jobs to create the wealth to be able to buy those houses? No, because it's artificial. This boom is not backed by reality. Y'all with me? You see how we just created a bubble? All those houses out there, people don't have the job. Again, there's only so many people who have powerful enough jobs to buy those $900,000 McMansions. Okay? That's why we paved Paradise, put up a parking lot, and we don't have houses. We just got all these houses that were made that people aren't buying. So the Federal Reserve sees that. The Federal Reserve sees those high prices for houses, and it sees those guys, all those houses being created. It says, okay, we're going to stop this bubble. Okay, and by the way, what's happening? What has happened to the prices for houses? No, up until now, what's been happening to the price? What do we call that when the price keeps going up and up and up and up? Inflation. And they're afraid we're creating a bubble, we've got inflation, and so they stop making more money. Well, because these guys weren't creating their own value, they were getting the money from the Fed. Once the Fed stops creating money, guess what? They can't buy the houses anymore. Y'all with me? You see how you're seeing the bubble pop now? And then the downward spiral begins. Okay, well, busy chart here, though. So we got a high price for a house, but the people in the economy, see all these people? Okay, sunglasses off. Sunglasses off. There we go. If Smo needs to be there, we go. Okay, so all these people, they don't have money to pay this high price. Y'all with me? They lack the money to pay that high price, and the Fed's not giving it to them anymore. They don't have a high-powered job, a high-salary job, and they're not getting it from the Fed, so they're not buying those houses. Now, who's watching all this? Entrepreneur sees that, sees all those people without the money, sees the high price. The people say, I'm not paying that high price. I don't have my own money. Now, when the entrepreneur is not able to sell his houses anymore, what does he stop doing? He stops making houses. If people aren't buying them, can you pay people to make stuff that no one's buying? See? Oh, it's because you're mean and selfish and greedy. Doesn't matter whether you're mean or selfish or greedy. Remember, Henry Ford. What was the problem with Henry Ford? He was an anti-Semite. What's an anti-Semite? He didn't like Jews. Milton Friedman was Jewish. Do you think Milton Friedman cared that Henry Ford didn't like Jews? He was a free market guy. I don't care what Henry Ford thinks about Jews. I'm so glad he's around. I bet if we could have asked, he's dead now, but if we could ask him, he'd say, I'm glad he was around. You know why? Because he lowered the price of cars for everybody, including Jews. That's the thing about the free market. It doesn't matter what people think about each other. They're still cooperating. When you stop thinking about the free market as being competition, it's cooperation. So it doesn't matter whether these entrepreneurs, some of these entrepreneurs are great people, but it doesn't matter. They are guiding the economy. And so it doesn't matter whether he cares about his workers or not. If he's not able to sell what the workers are producing, can he still pay them? What can you pay your workers? Yeah, but the value of what they produce, but if no one's buying it, does it have any value? So what's he going to have to do? What's that? Pink slip. What's a pink slip? That's a metaphor for you're fired. I'm sorry. We don't need you anymore. That guy is now fired. But now, the downward spiral continues. That's the beginning of the downward spiral. That guy gets fired. But now, that guy was going to buy a radio, but watch what happens. He's unemployed now. So guess what he can't do anymore? He can't buy that radio. Now, the entrepreneur who owns the radio company, that radio didn't get sold. What does the entrepreneur have to do? Pink slip. I'm sorry, you're fired. Frown face. Now, the radio guy was going to buy a car. Oh, guess what? He didn't get paid. He can't buy the car. What's the car worker going to get? What's he about to get? Pink slip. Oh. Now, you keep this going, and what do we have? He can't buy stuff, okay? So the Great Depression was characterized by 25% unemployment. Imagine that. A quarter of the people unemployed. Some areas, it's even worse, like half the people unemployed. Okay, so Horrible unemployment. All these people unemployed. However, we've seen this before, right? Remember, if you looked at that beginning chart that I showed you of the economic history of the country, the beginning of the Great Depression was not as bad as the depression we had in 1920-21. It actually went deeper. But what did the government do in 1920-21? This is what I wish it would do more. Nothing. If the government stays out, the economy can actually turn around. Look what happens if the government stays out. So all these unemployed people, what is the price we pay for workers? What do you call it? Wages. And what happens to the price of something if you got a whole lot of it? Goes down, like Henry Ford with the cars. You got a whole lot of workers wanting to work, they don't have a job. So what happens to the price of workers? Wages. What happens to wages? And you got this many people work, wages go down and down and down. Finally, that entrepreneur sees all these unemployed people, says, man, I bet they'll work for nothing. Look at all these unemployed guys. You know what? I'm going to go ahead and hire somebody. At that price, I'll hire somebody. Bam. Now he can buy stuff. The radio company can hire that guy. See how it turns around. An example. University of Georgia. I've been teaching a while. I've seen a couple business cycles. One of the recessions we'd had got so bad, UGA was going to build a parking deck. And they said, hey, if you're going to build something, you say, who wants to build this? You put out an offer, get proposals. The proposals were so, if you've got a construction company, times are really bad. Somebody says, we want to build, what will you offer to build it for? High price or low price? Really low. And they said, we'll build for nothing. And UGA said, hey, prices are that low. We don't just build a parking deck. We'll build an extra office building at that price. Then they hired more people. Those people could buy stuff. The economy turns around. Nice. Have a good day. So what is the government going to do to make things worse, to prevent a recovery? Well, first of all, remember we're a democracy, right? Do you want to run an economy by democracy? We're about to find out what happens when you run an economy by democracy. What is popular? Is it popular to blame Americans and the American government? Well, that might be popular, but it's not popular with the government, right? So who do you blame? You blame other countries, right? Now, what do we call a guy who manipulates the people's emotions to get power? Demagogue, right? That's the problem with the democracy. So anyway, we're going to see first what happens before we slap on protective tariffs. So what's a tariff? Yeah. Now it could be imports or exports, but because the Constitution, to get it passed, to please the South, they said no tariffs on exports, but we can still tax imports. Okay. So what's a protective tariff? So a lot of here, think this through. See if this will satisfy a lot of Americans. Americans don't have enough jobs, so we say, hey, we need to buy American stuff to provide jobs for Americans. Except for you said Americans. Okay. So anybody seen the Kid Rock video? Did I mention that yesterday? Somebody showed me yesterday a video. I don't know if you've heard of Kid Rock. He's a musician, and he made a video of him doing skeet shooting rather, skeet shooting with imported gas grills. So they took these grills and they launched them into the air, and he shoots them with his shotgun, right? So all the guys, they don't care now about economics. They just want to go shoot some flying grills with propane in them and see them explode. Yeah, okay. Uh, Now if I can get you back on task, okay. Um, so will that sell to America saying we're going to save American jobs? We're going to put big tariffs on imports so people have to buy American and save American jobs. That would convince a lot of Americans. Okay. But this is, economists disagree about a lot of stuff. Um, Truman said he wished you could have, President Truman said he wished you could find a one-arm economist because he said, well, every time I ask an economist a question, they say, well, on the one hand, but then on the other hand. So we wanted to. Okay. So anyway, economists will debate about everything, but there's one thing. There's a couple, but one thing they will all agree on, and that's protective tariffs are bad. And this is one place in history where they actually agreed, and the economists got together and said, don't do this. Don't do a protective tariff. So, of course, everybody ignored them. That's right, because the economics is boring and nobody pays attention to it. Okay, so let's see why you don't want to do that. Let's see if you did not. It's called the Smoot-Hawley because that's the guys who got it through Congress. If you did not do a tariff, a protective tariff, how trade is good. Okay, so you're an American industry and you buy. See that little dollar sign? It's a small dollar sign, so it's cheap. You buy cheap cloth from a foreign country. Okay, so you send them money, they send you cloth, right? So they say, what do they get now? What do they have? Okay, what kind of money? Yeah, American dollars. Now that upsets a lot of people. They're taking advantage of us. They got all our money. Okay, Pace, just stop and think about it. What are they going to do with all that money? Where? So if they just keep it, I mean, if all they wanted was money, they could turn on their own printing presses, right? What is the point of money? To buy stuff, right? And if that's all it is, we send them little pieces of paper called money, and they send us stuff. I got a great plan. Nobody has to work anymore. We're just going to party. We'll print up money and send it to other countries. They will send us food and clothes and laptops and all this. Isn't that a great plan? No. The point is they need to do something with that money. They get that money so they can buy stuff from us. Often American farmers are very productive. Often they buy American agricultural product. So, see that high price for American products? Okay, the foreigners. Now it's to them it's cheap, but America, it's like the farmers are like, yeah, we're selling all this stuff. But to the foreigners, why are they buying American stuff? Because American farmers are so productive, they can provide food at a cheaper price than anybody. Okay, so everybody's happy, right? So free trade, good. Protectionism, boo. Let's see what happens when we get protectionism in here, which is, by the way, very popular. There's a wall there. Okay, that's a tariff wall. A wall. Not that wall. But wait, there's more. The government has more things to do to help you. Okay. Remember what happens if the government stays out. What is the entrepreneur looking at? Yeah, he's looking at that little bitty price tag, right? Why? Because if you got a whole bunch of people desperate for work, what's going to happen to wages? Yeah. And remember, it had to be that way because how much can you pay your workers? The value of what they're producing. But if few people are buying your stuff and you can't charge that much, you can't afford to pay those old high wages. You have to lower the wages your workers are getting, or you can't hire them in the first place. So now that wages have dropped to equal, they've gotten now correlated to that lower demand that's out there, we've got resynced. The economy synced back up. And now the entrepreneur says, now, okay, if you're willing to work for that, I'm not selling much, but if that's all you're asking for, yeah, I can hire you if that's what you're asking for, and the economy turns around. That's if the government stays out of it. But does it? No, because the government's here to help. So, not if the government gets involved. And the government says, hey, don't let wages go down. That's Big Brother pointing at you. Say, no, not that price. Keep the prices high. And the entrepreneur's, what? Why is he flashing like that? He's triggered. He's a snowflake, millennial entrepreneur. No, he's saying, I can't pay him that. Again, it's like if we set a minimum wage saying nobody gets paid less than 50, right? You want $15, but I really care about the poor. I want them to earn 50. So I've got more virtue signaling going on. So what happens to the poor? Yeah, nobody gets a job, right? So the entrepreneur can't, we never get to hit bottom. Remember the question was, it was not how did we collapse? That had happened before. We know that. It's the boom bust, right? The question is, why did we stay down? This is why we stay down. The government doesn't let the usual mechanics of the recovery happen. Does that make sense? Okay, let me move on. But wait, there's more. What else does the government do? Taxes. Okay, let's think of these things. Are these things going to be popular? Hey, let's tax foreigners. Is that going to be popular? Yes. Attack foreigners. That's going to be popular in America. Okay. Democratic. Are we going to say rich bosses? You guys got to pay higher wages. Is that going to be popular? Yeah. Are people going to say yeah? Is demagogue going to love to say that? Yeah. Okay. How about tax the rich? Take their stuff and give it to us. Is that going to be popular? Yeah. So Hoover taxes the rich. Now, why does he do it? Because FDR attacks him in 1932. What are we doing in 1932? What's happening? What's happening? Why would FDR be talking about Hoover in 1932 as opposed to election year? And so FDR had actually said, "Hey, Hoover, you've got deficits. You got budget deficit. What's a deficit? When the government is spending more than it's taking in. So how do you get rid of a budget deficit? One way you can do is raise taxes. So that's what Hoover does. Is that what you want to do during a recession? Nobody thinks this is a good idea today, by the way. Economists right and left think the tariff was a bad idea, and they think raising taxes is a bad idea. Okay, even if you're far left, they say, okay, raise taxes later, but not at the bottom of a recession. Okay, because why? If that entrepreneur, you take away his money, guess what? He doesn't have he can't hire as many workers. Does that make sense? And now they can't buy stuff. And people who were going to buy, rich people who were going to buy from your factories, they're not buying from your factories as much. So you have to let more people go. And then those people can't buy. Does that make sense? Is this a time to raise taxes? No, we want people buying more stuff. You want to lower taxes. How about that? Great whirlpool of economic death. Because giant whirlpool of okay, you guys are paying attention. That's a good thing. I did that on purpose. Now, if These guys get unemployed. What can they no longer do? They can't buy stuff. So if they can't buy stuff, what happens? The guys they're going to buy from, now what can they not do? There it is. Do you so go back to that graph I showed you? Remember 1920, 21 just bounced right back up. 1929 goes down, stays down. This is what's going on. But wait, there's more. Who's that up there? That picture there? That's Roosevelt. That's Roosevelt. And again, what do we call somebody who attacks the rich? Because, okay, well, let's think about this. What's the problem with the democracy? Against who? The who? Okay. Is it popular to crush the minority? Yes. Yeah, the majority loves that, especially if what's the minority? Rich people. Rich people. Okay. So, um, who could get power by saying, get the rich? Who's it? What do we call a guy who gets power by giving the people what they want, whether it's good for them or not? Well, yeah, elected, right? That's true. A demagogue. Remember that? Who did the founders fear? Why did they fear democracy? One of the reasons is a demagogue. Okay. So he's got his loudspeaker and he's talking about the entrepreneurs, the rich people, because we all hate rich people. Why do we hate rich people? Because they got so much money and they're greedy. I want to take their money, but I'm not greedy. Yeah. Okay. So can poor people be greedy? Yeah. Okay. So they they're greedy, and oftentimes we owe them money. Right. By the way, if you look at, oh no, I'm not even going to go there. No, no, no. Ask me later. Ask me later. What does he say? He calls these guys unscrupulous money changers, economic royalists. What does unscrupulous mean? Raise your hand. What is scruples? I'm going to. I'm just. Okay, scruples are principles of right and wrong. So if you're unscrupulous, you got no principles. You're immoral. Money changers just grab paper. And that's a common thing throughout American history. Attack people who don't work. They just move pieces of paper around. They just move money around. They don't work. I've got calluses. I work. Okay. Is it work? There are some people who work on Wall Street and we hate them because they're rich. Okay. But I guarantee they work harder than you. There are some people who they get up Monday morning, they go to Wall Street, they work into the night, they sleep at their office. They wake up Tuesday morning early and work at their office, go home late Wednesday, come back Thursday, work into the night Thursday, stay at the office Thursday night, go Friday. They work all the time. Is that work? Yeah, it's work. Do they have calluses? No. But as I've asked my male students before, would you rather do a 30-mile road march or write an essay? 30-mile road march, right? Just don't make me think. Beat me, right? Don't make me think. Okay. Get a little distracted there. The point is, unscrupulous money changers, right? What's royalist? What's a royalist? What does that make you think of? Who's royalty? What's another word for royalty? Okay, what do we call the people who are royal, who are treated different, have different rights and different from the rest of us? Starts with an A. Aristocrats. Aristocrats. Now, do we like aristocrats? By the way, this is actually something I don't. America does not like aristocrats, right? But how are American rich people different from European aristocrats? How did European aristocrats get rich? Their ancestors conquered and took people's stuff, right? How did the robber barons get rich? By creating wealth for the poor. They got rich. How did Henry Ford get rich? By making cars for poor people. Is that aristocracy? Is that taking advantage of people? No. Okay, so but anyway, hey, is that going to go over well with the crowd? But that's a good point. By the way, he's an aristocrat too, which is kind of annoying because he's rich, but he didn't do anything to get it. He just got born with it. But when he calls the robber barons, the entrepreneurs, when he calls them economic royalists, is that going to be popular among the people? That's going to be very popular because oh, he's attacking them, yay, because we hate those guys. However, do you want? Yeah, we hate the rich because they got money and we owe them money, but who creates jobs? They're the rich. They're creating jobs. So if you tell this, what's he thinking? Let's look. He just got called an economic royalist by the president. Unscrupulous money trader. What's he thinking? Oh, what's the future hold for me? He's going to take my stuff. What else does it hold for me? He's going to tell me what to do, control me, won't be able to run my business. So what's he going to do? He said, if I try, okay, how did the robber barons help workers? Why did Henry Ford pay his workers more? Why could he pay his workers more? Because they produce more. Why could they produce more? What did they have that enabled them? Huh? The technology. The assembly line is the example. Technology. Okay, but what did Henry Ford need? Capital. Investment. Every country that's attacked its investors has hurt itself economically. Spain. Spain attacked the Jews, and the Jews had been the money lenders. Kicked out all the Jews. What happened to Spain's economy? Down the tubes. Okay? We love to do that. Now in America, we've welcomed Jews. We got more Jews than any other country in the world, except for possibly Israel. Okay, I'm not sure if it's America or Israel has got more Jews. Has that benefited America? You betcha. Jews have more Nobel Prizes in science. They've got lots of copyrights and patents. A lot of bankers. Have we benefited from that? Yes. Okay, but hey, has there been anti-Semitism in America? Henry Ford. But again, I don't care. As long as they don't hurt them, they let them go make money, we all benefit. Okay? But now he's afraid, oh, if I invest, it's sucked up by the giant government tax vacuum and it doesn't get to the workers to make them more. So forget that. I'm just going to keep it. I'm just going to sit on my money. Is that what we need? How do you get it? Let's think through this again. Problem in a collapsed economy, people aren't buying stuff. But again, how are your parents able to buy stuff? What do your parents have to do? They got to produce, right? And how could they buy more stuff if they can produce more? How are they going to produce more stuff if they've got technology? Where's that come? Investment from the evil robber barons. But if the robber barons are sitting on their money, it never gets to the worker to make them more productive. Why are Americans earning more than anybody else? Because they're the most highly capitalized. But if the capitalists keep the capital, it doesn't go to the workers. And I was thinking about expanding my factory, but now I'm not because I'm afraid the government's just going to take everything. FDR later talks about 100% tax over. He said, once you make more than this, it was like $1 million or something. Once you make more than that, we're just taking everything. Okay, are you going to work if you know the government's taking it all? No, you're just going to sit on your money or you'll hide it somewhere. Send it to another country. Is that good for your workers? But it makes the voters feel good. Yeah, because he's rich. Stick it to the man. Okay, so now you get more unemployed people not buying stuff. But wait, there's more. Yes, sir. No, I don't like any show. Okay. Huh? Yes, yes. Okay. Um, Shark Week. Shark. That's a different thing, I think. Okay. 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 Now, let's move on. It gets worse. The NRA, not National Rifle Association. National Recovery Administration, created by the National Recovery Act. Okay. Now, what happens? Everybody, you're watching, you're going to miss it. Bam, collapse. That's what the NRA does to America. Thank you. What was the myth and the reality? The myth is the capitalists wouldn't do enough to save the economy. The government wouldn't do anything to save us. And then in comes the NRA and saves us. Nonsense. I heard that. The reality, the NRA prevented entrepreneurs from restarting the economy. Okay, look at 19B. See where we are? You're on page 2, 19B. What's the theory behind the NRA? It's not truth, but this is the theory about why they think it's good. Supposedly, this is why a lot of American intellectuals became Marxist, because he said, hey, capitalism is inherently unstable. It's going to collapse. And they said, oh, Marx is right. No, it was the government that caused it. But anyway, here's the theory. Overproduction caused by, what does that mean? Cutthroat competition. Cutthroat competition. Oh. Now, okay, that's an intimidating vicious. Okay. Now, listen, why are business people cutthroat and what's the problem? What's the underlying problem? Starts with a GR. They're greedy. That's why you put in the history books, because most teachers at heart, they're a bunch of Marxists, and they think, oh, these evil people, they're greedy. If we could just get rid of greed, everything would be fine. Is that going to work? Oh, so, okay, 1929, everybody got greedy. Before that, they weren't greedy. No, they're always greedy. Okay, so here's what they said. Competition got prices so low, like I'm trying to undercut you, you're trying to, and we get so low, nobody can make any money, and we can't pay our workers. And so what we need to set, oh, we love this word. Is this going to be a popular word? Fair. We need fair prices, fair wages. So the government has to come in. The NRA would help business regulate itself to keep prices from going too low and keep things fair. Supposedly, the NRA would also force companies to increase purchasing power, help workers buy more stuff. How? It will make businesses hire more people. How? Let's say I'm going to have Max work 60 hours a week. Oh, but then the problem is somebody else is going to lose a job. Carly loses a job because Max is doing all the working. So then they pass a law saying, Max, you can only work 30 hours a week. Are you greedy? Don't you want to share? Let's be fair. And so I can't hire him for more than 60 hours. Now, they said law, no, 30 hours. So I'm going to have to hire then Carly. And hopefully I'll have them both working. And now everybody has the ability to purchase. Okay? Does that make sense? That's not going to work. Who knows best how many workers they need and which are the best workers? Does some government bureaucrat know that? No. Okay. Also, they would force businesses to pay more money to their workers so the workers could have more money to go buy stuff. See how in their fairyland, all you got to do, we can legislate utopia. Just pass a bunch of laws making things better, and then it gets better. Is that how the real world works? No. Let's see what really happens when the NRA gets involved. Okay, remember how entrepreneurs could save the economy. Okay, things collapse, people buy stuff, get the economy going. Now, this would be nice. Let's think about this. Look up here, y'all. If that consumer buys something, that factory can keep that worker going, right? But look, wait, there's more. What if that consumer could buy even more stuff? Now, what is that factory going to have to do? Hire another worker. And now that worker, what can they do? And they can then go buy stuff. Yay! However, you can only pay workers. How much can you pay your workers? So if this guy is selling a shirt for $10, I can pay him 10, but can I pay him an extra 10? Can I pay him 20? No, because then you're going to run out of money. And then what are you going to pay him with? You can only pay your workers how much? As much as. So what's the key to, if workers are going to buy more stuff, they got to get paid more. But how are you going to get them paid more? They have to be able to produce more. Then the same guy puts another tire, then I put the windshield on or whatever. Okay, but then He made one car. He made one car, so how much could he get? He can only get that amount. He's not getting paid much because he's not producing much. But then, what's this? Now, what's happening to how much the workers are producing? It's going up. So now they produced a whole bunch of cars, and so they got paid. What happened to how much they got paid? Why? Why did it go up? Now, let's think about this. If they got paid more because they're producing more, now what can they do? They can buy more. So, guys, instead of just passing a law, you have to pay workers more, that's not going to work. You got to enable them to produce more. Because if I just pass a law, again, you say you love people, so you're going to make $15 minimum wage. I love them more, $50 minimum wage. But is anybody getting hired for $50? You have to enable them to produce more. So, if capitalism raises their waves because they're producing more, then what can they do with all that extra money? Look up there, y'all. What could they do with all that extra money? They could buy stuff, and then when they bought all that stuff, see how that's going on? When they bought the stuff, the companies could hire more. But again, where did they get the earnings to buy more stuff? They produced more. Does that make sense? But ladies and gentlemen, we've tried it for thousands of years. Who is good at making workers more productive? The government? Has that ever worked? Oh, well, let's try it again. It doesn't work. This is when the government tries to come in and save everybody. So, here are some surprising facts about the NRA, the National Recovery Act, which created the National Recovery Administration. A bunch of bureaucrats telling people what to do, setting up these codes, which are rules, right? But when the government sets up rules, it's a law. Because he said, well, we're just asking. And I said, oh, you're just asking? Oh, no. You have to do it. And if you don't, we're coming after you. Okay, so look at all these codes covering more than 2 million employers, 22 million workers, ranging from lightning rods to women's underwear, telling people how to do this stuff. Dog leashes, musical comedy, they're telling you how to do all these things. Who knows best how to produce stuff? Again, raise your hand if you know somebody who's an entrepreneur. Do you think they know how to do their job and run their company better, or some bureaucrat who lives in Washington, D.C.? Thank you. Then came the NRA, shortening hours of work, like I talked about, raising wages. What do I mean arbitrarily? Real raising of wages is because people produce more. Artificial, exactly. That's what the government does. Artificial land. And if we could just get more rainbows and unicorns, okay. And all of these are costs. They make it more expensive to do work. So that's a bureaucrat in the green jacket with a taking notes. Telling you what to do. So, okay. So, what's the NRA? National. What's that? The Blue Eagle. Has anybody heard of the Philadelphia Eagles? Do you know where they got that? From the Blue Eagle of the NRA. If you followed all their codes, you got this symbol saying you're being a good patriotic person. You are following the rules. Do you need the government telling you how to run your company? But that's what that is. And by the way, who's standing behind those? Is this a mere suggestion? No. They would literally, yes, millennials, I mean literally have cops come check for people who are working too many hours. A guy gets thrown in jail for charging a price for dry cleaning he's not supposed to charge. Does that sound like America to you? You know what? That's fascism. Fascism, okay, millennials, fascism is not people you don't like. Fascism is when the government tells everybody what to do. Okay. It prevented capitalist recovery. That's what the NRA did. The problem number one, prevented the capitalist system from creating economic recovery. Shh. Hey, listen up. Shorten work hours. If we say you can't, remember I told Max you can't work so many hours. Well, then now we're not producing as much. And if he's not producing as much, he can't get paid as much. So he can't buy as much. All these regulations telling you what to do. Who knows how to do things more efficiently, the bureaucrat or the entrepreneur? A lot of people could have been hired if they were hired at a lower wage. But the government is here to help and says, no, you can't pay that. And behind all of this, the popo. Okay. Look at this, y'all. This is scary. The NRA made the cost of doing business 40% higher. We're 40% less efficient. What did Ford do to his workers? He made them more efficient, more productive. We had this one guy who increased what a steel factory could output, Taylor. He would go and break all the steps in making steel into all these steps, and then each one scientifically decide what's the most efficient way. He said, okay, you need to shovel coal into an oven. Here's a big shovel, medium, small shovel. See which works best. This time bend your knees. Next time bend your back. He'd find all these different ways to see what's most efficient, and he doubles how much steel one factory can make. But if the government comes in, makes us 40% less efficient, can you pay workers as much if they're producing less? So again, the American economy before the NRA has actually it started to recover. You actually have employment in factories going up. Workers are getting paid more. Oh, but then it hits the NRA. What's going to happen? And collapses. Industrial production after the NRA went down. Okay, if we're producing 25% less, guess what? Workers are not going to be able to get paid as much. And then when they they don't get paid as much, they can't buy as much, other people get laid off. This is why it stays down. We already explained why it collapsed, but why did it stay down? The government trying to help. Unemployment goes up to nearly 13 million. You want evidence? Evidence that it's the NRA? When the Supreme Court finds the NRA unconstitutional, what happens to the economy? It recovers. It bounces up. You get this. See where the economy, 1935, the economy bounces up. Finally, all of those restraints the government was putting on the evil economic royalists get taken away, and the economy gets started.
So the next problem I'd like to talk about is how the government gives more power to big businesses at the expense of small ones. And I'll mention that briefly, but in just a little while, but I don't have enough to go on. So more on that in the future. So when you send your kids here, I'll teach them about that. Okay. But this is where it gets really scary. The NRA leads to fascism. Okay. Now, this is not what your average college snowflake millennial considers fascism. Because these people protesting, rioting on college campuses nowadays, what do they mean when they say fascist? Anybody I don't like, you're mean, so you're a fascist, right? The only person we can say is bad nowadays is Hitler. Everybody else, you don't hurt anybody's feelings, you don't be judgmental, but Hitler was bad. Okay, Stalin killed a lot more than Hitler. Mao killed a lot more people than Hitler. Okay, Pol Pot killed a bigger percentage of his country. Okay, so yeah, Hitler was evil, but he wasn't alone. Regardless, I just think that shows we don't really think about what we mean when we say fascism. What does fascism mean? How about we go to the guy who really made it popular? Who really popularized that term, fascism? Well, who first introduced fascism to the world? And he said he ran his country that way. Il Duce, right? Well, according to Mussolini, by the way, we're going to find out some of the New Deal people looked up to Mussolini. Mussolini actually had positive things to say about the New Deal, and then some somebody had to say, hey, stop saying nice things about the New Deal. You're making them look bad. But this is kind of scary that the New Deal is going on at the same time as Mussolini and while Hitler's coming in. What did Mussolini say? This is what fascism is. Everything inside of, when you say the state, what does that mean? Not Georgia, but the government and its people, like it's all one. Nothing outside of it. We're going to control it all to make sure everything works right. The free market isn't working, the economy's not going, and we're not doing well because the free market doesn't work, and we're going to lead our country into higher ideals with fascism, going to the next stage of evolution. We'll make everything better. The NRA was fascist. Let's look, for example, who ran? And by the way, what's ironic about NRA? National, what's the R supposed to stand for? Recovery. What do we find out? It's actually, what is it doing to recovery? It's destroying it. So here's the guy who was the head of the, so here's the definition, sorry. Okay, now here's what the guy, I don't know where he got that nickname. But that's the guy in charge. He'd been a general. What do generals do? Tell people what to do. Is that a free country where people tell you what now, your parents are supposed to tell you what to do. But is the government? Well, it says, yeah, don't shoot other people. But other than that, you're supposed to decide how to live your own life on your own. So that's what, and what does that guy have to say? He actually, guess who he looked up to? That's right, Il Duce. He looked up to Hitler. He admired him, and he admitted such. And remember, there were plenty of people who looked up to Hitler. Remember those progressives who said, hey, the Soviet Union, that's the future. Right? Now, what you often hear is people say, oh, no, well, you see, this is different, though. Because fascists, Nazis, those guys, they're right-wing dictators. Stalin is different. Communism, that's left-wing. So that's the difference. It's not the same thing. It's like, okay, who came up with that, dividing it up that way? The communists. Stalin made a pact with Hitler. If you want to, is that guy evil? Well, one thing you could ask, did he make a pact with Hitler? Yes, he did. Okay, well, then maybe he's evil, right? Stalin made a pact with Hitler. Why? To split up Poland. And then, when Hitler invaded the Soviet Union, and they said, okay, actually, the Nazis are bad guys, then they decided they got to come up with some way of distinguishing them from each other because they're both, government runs everything. And so they said, well, those guys are right-wing, we're left-wing. And a lot of American intellectuals, who by now, many are taking orders from the Soviet Union. They used to say, oh, no, that didn't happen. We've got the documents to prove it. A lot of these guys were communists taking their orders from Comintern in Moscow. And you've got people protesting in America. At one point, they're protesting, hey, you're so pro-war, you need to stop being against Germany. And as soon as Russia says, oh, now it's straight out of 1984. In 1984, they're protesting, and then they just switch and say, the guy who was our enemy, now he's our friend. The guy who was our friend, now he's our enemy. And the same thing happens. These protesters switched their signs right at the protest. Had been saying, America, don't be so warlike, you greedy capitalist big dog warmongers. And then they get the word from their communist overlords, oh, actually now we want America to go to war with Germany. Now they scratch it out and say, do something about the Nazis, you're horrible. Okay, so Nazis, communists, actually have a lot in common. It's all about the group as opposed to the individual, right? Matter of fact, what had Mussolini been before he became a fascist? He was a socialist. And what does Nazi stand for? National Socialism. And communism is supposed to be extreme socialism. So you want to know what the opposite of fascism is? It's not communism. They are actually very much alike. And remember, they all kill lots of, actually, Mussolini didn't kill as many people as the Nazis and communists did. What's the opposite of fascism? Limited government. Look at that definition. What sounds like the opposite of it? Is communism the opposite of that? No, telling people what to do fits right in. The opposite of that is a constitution that restrains the government. Okay, sorry. I need to re-engage my filter. That was a little more than I intended to go. Okay, so Mussolini, he was a fan of Mussolini, and what did he say? Tell me if this sounds like limited government to you. This should scare you. This guy is in charge of the NRA. He's been a general, and what does he say about will people do what they're told? Look at that. Anybody in the government saying that, you should be scared. They're going to tell us what to do. I said, any of you entrepreneurs, right? You think you're too high and mighty to do what we tell you? What should you expect? You're going to get a sock in the nose. Why did I make it a red fist? Yeah. That's un-American, y'all. That's the NRA. Fascism. And across America, we would see if you submitted to the government's dictates and were a good drone like you're supposed to be and do what the government tells you, you get a symbol, right, to put in your service. We are doing our part. We're falling lockstep in place with everybody else. And so we're doing our part. You fit in if you did the things, set the working wages and hours the government tells you to have. They would have, in every major city in the country, they had parades, like soldiers on parade. Well, you know what that reminds me of? Nuremberg. No, we didn't gas Jews. But this is government controlling people. Propaganda, telling people where to go, what to do. The message was clear. Everyone is expected to join. Across the country, dozens of men were fined or jailed or both for failing to volunteer for these parades. Remember, America was founded on, what's the foundation of liberty? Right, yeah, right. No, what without representation? Taxation. Because it's taking away your property, that's how you're free. Okay? Well, one guy decided with his property, with his company, he was going to do what he wanted. There was a Taylor's Code run by the NRA, set up by the NRA. So this is how much we will allow you to charge for doing dry cleaning. And so he said, I'm not going to go with the government mandated code of 40 cents for pressing a suit of clothes. I'm going to go with 35. And you can't tell me how to run my business, is what he said. Now, that sounds like an American, doesn't it? Not, I'm going to give you a punch in the nose if you don't do what the government says. That isn't American. You can't tell me how to run my business. That sounds more like an American, right? They said, go ahead and throw me in jail. Guess what? They did. And then some judge said, well, we'll teach you. And I'm thinking, that judge is a fascist. And then you've got, of course, these authorities, NRA code authorities saying, hey, if we just have more people like that, then people will start falling in line. But you know what? What's even more annoying, as I mentioned, you're helping big business crush little business by doing this. Because when they say, oh, we're going to get industry, in quotes, we're going to get industry together, can you get every person who owns a factory together to talk with the NRA boss? No. So who are you going to get? You're going to get the bosses of the biggest companies, right? Kind of like when they say, oh, labor, like all workers. And really what you mean is union, which does not include all workers. But then you let unions talk as if they're all of labor. This is a common Marxist fallacy. Class solidarity. It's all the same, right? But remember what we've learned is everybody in each class working together. Remember the New York City draft riots when poor Irish people killed poor black people? How about that for class solidarity? Okay? Or how about we actually see so we see conflict within the class and we see cooperation between the classes. Remember when white robber barons were willing to hire black poor workers because they worked for less? Matter of fact, that's one of the reasons many people in the South were angry at them because didn't have solidarity with their race. And so what we see is the government says, okay, well, we'll talk to, quote, industry, unquote. But they really just got the biggest businesses, and then who got to write the code for the industry? The biggest businesses. And so what happened to the little ones? They get crushed. For example, you got a guy in Ohio who had a tire company with 1,000 employees. That's sizable, but it's not as big as the giant ones. How did he try to make his way? How did he survive? He charged less than the other companies. So you know what the other companies did? When the government talked to them, they set code, they set the minimum you could charge for tires above what that guy was charging so they could push him out of business. Okay? So don't buy this that, oh, they talk to industry, they talk to the labor, they talk to the people with connections. That when the government gets involved, who has a say is the people who've got connections. Okay. Here's a quote from the Roosevelt myth, about what would happen with the NRA. The NRA was discovering it couldn't get people to just follow the rules, so they had to force it. Again, when the government says, "Oh, we've got some suggestions, we've got some codes," are those mere suggestions? Are they just asking you? No, they're telling you. And so what did they have to do? They had to send shock troops throughout the community to make sure people were. They were literally, y'all are missing the slide. Okay? They were literally taking axes, kicking indoors, breaking into factories, make sure, hey, you're not sewing pants in the middle of the night, are you? That's breaking the law. Because if you didn't force it, the public would not comply, and they knew that. Okay, so like I said, this video, if you're online, go to Jimmy Durante, or go to YouTube, type in Jimmy Durante with an E, FDR New Deal propaganda clip. And this should scare you. This should scare you. I mean, don't you find this disturbing? A little weird, gross, that the American government is paying for the people to get propaganda like this? Famous actor. Behind the New Deal symbol is the cult of personality, FDR. Right? We're not supposed to, we don't have a dear leader in America, worship somebody we're supposed to worship. He's Mr. President. Remember, they didn't come up with a fancy name for the president on purpose. And so we contrast this with North Korea, when their dear leader dies, and everybody screams and cries because last time a dear leader died and people didn't scream and cry enough, they got shot. We're supposed to just have a president. And how about, notice what happened to that banker. What happened to that banker? What did he do? He took stuff from him. Why did he only take from the banker? Because how do people feel about bankers? We hate bankers, economic royalists, right? So what do you think the bankers are watching this? They're like, okay, I'm gonna just go hide somewhere. I'm keeping my money, right? Are bankers evil? No more. Well, I mean, everybody's evil, but are they any more evil than anybody else? You think poor people aren't greedy? Everybody's greedy, or at least no more greedy than anybody else. It's not like you've got this class thing that one group is more greedy than the other. And notice what did he tell the banker you got to do? Go get a chauffeur. This, the magic fairy dust unicorn philosophy of economics, just have something we call jobs. Yeah, but I don't need a chauffeur. Yeah, but get one, and that'll just get the economy going. Okay, you know what I'd rather a banker do? Invest in companies that are going to make their workers more productive. Then, what did he do with that exterminator? What did he say? Yeah, give them a weekend. Remember we talked about this. Cut their work hours. What did the exterminator say that I'd have to do? Hire, oh, good. Then they've got jobs. What did he say to that hypochondriac? Yeah, get all these doctors you don't need. And he bore the brunt. What does that mean? He bore the brunt. What did he? It's like this idea that there's a war, we got to fight to get the economy going. That's not how the economy works. Okay? What did FDR have to suffer through? He didn't. He just went to the White House. He was rich and he stayed rich. Now, again, do you think you're getting this in most history books? Now, now, oh, the FDR was wonderful. The New Deal was great. No, it wasn't. It was actually kind of scary. And again, this is happening at the same time Mussolini's got fascism going on in Italy, and Hitler's coming up with Nazism, and Stalin has absolute control in Russia. That's kind of scary. But you know what? I would rather have a government afraid of its people than the people afraid of the government. That's how the founders had it. Remember, that's why they wanted the Second Amendment. That's one key way to limit the government. Okay, but it gets better. Okay, well, it doesn't get as scary. It gets disturbing. So the NRA was to deal with industrial recovery, right? National Industrial Recovery Act. Well, how are we going to deal with agricultural recovery? We'll adjust it. Okay, now, how was the AAA supposed to work? Here's the theory. See where I am on the objective list? The theory. This is number 20. We would raise farm income. Well, okay, farmers, remember we talked about farmers earlier, and their prices are down? Okay? Now, one reason the prices were down was all these tariffs are slapping on their on foreigners' goods, so foreigners aren't buying the farmer stuff anymore. But we won't talk about that. We don't tend to blame the government. Doesn't tend to blame the government. Who's the government going to blame? So, like for example, the government creates inflation, and landlords have to raise prices. Who does the government blame? Evil landlords, greedy capitalists, big dog, fat cats. Pig, half cat, half dog. Big cat dog. Okay, so I need to stop saying that. That was distracting. So we've got to blame not the government, even though it's the government part of the reasons why the farmers' prices have gone up. But also, why else? Why did we see in the 1800s farmers' prices went down? Well, what happened? What were the farmers doing in the 1800s? They're producing more stuff. And if the supply of stuff goes up, what happens to its price? You know what I call that? I call that progress. And we just don't need as many farmers. But this theory goes, the AAA theory, oh, well, the problem is the farmers aren't getting paid as much, and so they can't go buy as much stuff as they would have. So we got to get their prices up. So what's their approach? Look at this picture and see if you can figure out what their approach for increasing prices is going to be. You can't make this stuff up. Use like Mr. Rhodes, you did like with the Photoshop, right? This didn't really happen. It happened. This happened. Our government paid guys to shoot thousands of hogs and cattle. Now, are they going to give the food to the people who are hungry? No, because then prices would go down because people aren't demanding as much. They bury it. At a time when people can't get enough clothes, we blame Hoover. We pay people to plow underground cotton that's in the field that could be turned into clothes. We plow underground crops. Does this make sense to you? Okay. As a matter of fact, federal agents who saw this, the mules had been trained. You don't step on the crops. They had to be forced to trample the crops. So it turns out the mules are actually smarter than government officials and college professors. Because remember, FDR, he's got the brain trust. Remember them talking about that? He's got a brain trust. He's got all these smart people. And remember how much respect I've got for that. Okay? I'm not against book learning, like to say, well, this guy's he's been to college, so he gets to tell you what to do. You ever know somebody who's got their own company, but they haven't been to college? You ever run into that? Okay, you ever know somebody who hasn't been to college, but they know how to do their business? Even if they don't own a business, they know how to be a plumber or electrician. Okay? Think about it. Who in here knows somebody who's got their own who in here knows an entrepreneur? Right. Now, who knows better how to run their company? Them or some bureaucrat in Washington, D.C. that's telling all these bunches of entrepreneurs what to do? Them, right? Okay, but this brain trust, now they didn't specifically say this, but he's got professors working for him, and they're coming up with this plan. Henry Wallace, who will later who's as Secretary Secretary of Agriculture. Later, he will be the closest thing we come to the communists taking over the government. He actually hired a bunch of guys we now know were communist agents, spies. Um, and at the time, for decades, oh, you're just making stuff up. We now know. I mean, since the fall of the Soviet Union, we've got the evidence. We know for sure he hired people who were taking orders from Moscow. Well, anyway, um, he gave orders. He gave the orders to slaughter 6 million baby pigs before they could grow to full size. And it would pay farmers not to work at all. Okay, now, effects of the AAA, what's the effect going to be? Even if the AAA helped farmers by raising the prices they were earning, everybody else is suffering because you're raising prices at a time when I'm not getting paid anymore and I might even not have any money. Is that helping? And by the way, anybody heard of a stupid book and stupid movie? Maybe it's well written. I'm not the lit person. Okay, by John Steinbeck called The Grapes of Wrath. Exceedingly stupid. And how does he make the bad guy bad? He makes him the banker. He makes the banker look bad because he laughs. He's bald and fat, and he laughs at a guy who gets his house crushed. Is there an argument going on? Did he prove bankers are bad people? We deserve the New Deal? No, that's emotion. That's ad hominem. Anyway, turns out a lot of these people got kicked off their farms. Were kicked off their farms because of AAA policies, not the free market. What lesson do we learn from this? You don't make a society rich by destroying things. So I'm saying, sometimes it takes a PhD to believe this stuff. Okay, a person with common sense says, okay, when people are hungry, you don't shoot animals and bury them. So, what finally saved us from the disaster of the AAA? Just like with the NRA, the Supreme Court ruled it unconstitutional. Okay, but wait, there's more. FDR also, he likes to raise taxes. As I've mentioned before, nobody thinks this is a good idea. Democrats, Republicans, nobody thinks it's a good idea to raise taxes during a recession. But FDR signed into law steep income tax increases on whom? Get the rich. And a 5% withholding tax on corporate dividends. And corporations make money. But who hires people? Corporations. Then, 1934, he got another tax rise. All of this finally culminated. The top, you tell me, you guess, top income tax bracket. The more you pay, the bigger percentage. We still have that. Who wants to guess? What was the top bracket? What percentage of your money would they take? Give me a number. What percent? Higher, 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 higher. 90%. 90%. He actually wanted 100% for people making over a certain amount. Now think about that. If you know that when you create more wealth, they're going to take 90% of your wealth, or 100, but even 90, are you going to go to work as much? And if you don't go to work, and you're an entrepreneur, what do entrepreneurs do when they go to work? What do they create? Well, wealth and jobs. Well, let's see what's going to happen. Look up here. You got your income tax vacuum with FDR up there saying horrible things about the evil robber barons. Now that money's not going to factories to make them more productive. You can't expand and hire people. And if consumers don't have as much money, look up here, y'all. Rich say, oh, those rich people, they're not, don't let them buy stuff. But look, when people can't buy stuff because the government gets their money, look what happens. He was going to buy right if he's unemployed. He was going to buy, oh no. Nobody likes this idea. This is bipartisan. Don't raise taxes during a recession. Okay? Okay, so FDR gives some money to that guy. And then when he gets paid, the company he was going to buy from hires somebody. And then that guy buys something. And then they hire somebody. See how it works? See the theory? Okay? And so you had the CWA, Civil Works Administration, and the Works Progress Administration. That's the theory. They would try to prime the pump of the economy. Following? Okay, that's a, however, the sad reality of it was actually waste. Let's look at the CWA. They would actually, one example, they paid people to use balloons to chase birds out of areas where they didn't want birds. Okay? Yeah. To get them away from the public buildings. I guess they're going to poop on the public buildings. They, wait, there's more. They would pay people to chase tumbleweeds out of an area. I'm not making this up. Okay? They hired actors, unemployed actors, to give free shows, pay librarians to catalog stuff. Oh, maybe that'll be useful. Okay, but stop and think about it. Are you going to pay for that on your own if the government didn't force you to pay for that? Now, at the beginning, these are supposed to be short-lived. Weren't supposed to last long. Here's what FDR said at the beginning. We're not going to give these the phrases make work. We're not going to keep doing this make up work stuff. But you know what? We didn't. We kept doing it. Anybody ever been to Kennesaw Mountain? Anybody go to the trails of Kennesaw Mountain here? You ever see the sign say CCC, Civilian Conservation Corps? And it's like, oh, how cool! It's historical Civilian Conservation Corps. They've been here. What did they do? They would clear trees. They would make roads. Okay, it's nice. I make good use of it. I go out in the state parks all the time. Okay. Most people, by the way, thanks guys. If you guys never go to state parks, you're paying for them so that I can go use them. Okay. So they're going out there creating, roads out in the forest. We can go check it out, stuff like. But really, do we have much to show today for what those guys did? I'm not convinced we did. But most history books, they say how wonderful it is because it gave people a job. Always watch that. We said we're creating jobs. What's the point of a job supposed to be? To create wealth, not to just fill a chair with somebody so you can give them money. Okay? He didn't want really just giving people money for doing nothing. He wanted it to be real work. However, the guy in charge of this thing, Harry Hopkins, I don't know what they're doing. Okay, do you think if you went to the CEO of Toyota, you think he knows what his people are doing? He didn't know what every single person's doing, but are they all contributing? If he's got somebody at Toyota who's not contributing to make a better car, yeah, they're not sticking around. Why? Because what is Toyota out to make? Yeah, what do we call it? Profits. Oh, but that's the wonderful thing about the government. They don't care about profits. Yeah, so they waste stuff. Okay, then the WPA comes in, the Work Progress Administration. Oh, that CWA was too wasteful. They're just throwing money out. We got to get rid of that. We got to replace it. The CWA came to an end within just a couple months. Got replaced with another supposedly temporary relief program to give people jobs. This administration would give rise to a new term, boondoggle, because it produced many things that we ended up not needing. Now some things would be apparently useful, like bridges. Okay, so 77,000 bridges, 116,000 buildings, and I love to point at these things. See that WPA sign right in the middle? Okay, what we made, yay. Okay, but stuff they would produce a lot of other stuff that we don't need. And think about it. Do we necessarily need all those bridges? If you're in the desert and we pay somebody to build a bridge, will they build a bridge? No. Blake, yes, we need that bridge. Okay. Everybody else, what? We don't need that bridge. What is wealth? Stuff people want or need. Is that wealth? No. Do we have an unlimited amount of steel? Yes. If we take that steel to build a bridge in the desert, that's something we can't use for what we really do need. We could have put that in conveyor belts to use for businessmen to put into their factories to make workers more productive. This is waste. With good reasons, critics refer to the WPA as we piddle around. So, The next agency that came around, like we already said, was the WPA. Okay? That, yeah, they built some bridges, as we just talked about, but it's with good reason that critics referred to the WPA as we piddle around, because they would do many things that normal people would find a waste of time. So, again, what is wealth?
Stuff. People want and need.
Stuff that people want and need, right? Okay. And how do we know that you want and need it?
Prices.
Yeah, you'll pay for it. That sets the price. If you don't pay for it, the price isn't there. So, ask yourself, would you pay someone to catalog 350 different ways to cook spinach? No. Would you pay for quote living newspapers? One on the left. Would you pay for unemployed actors to act out plays about current events with, by the way, government spin on them? It's basically propaganda. They'd have one example of one that was basically Marxism. Okay, the Bolshevik ideas in there, and that would when the New Deal is going up to the Constitution, taking a side on that court case, right? Is that the government's job? But basically, that's what the government does. It makes you pay for advertisements for stuff it wants you to pay for. Is that fair? Is that what the government's supposed to be doing? Is that, well, again, what type of government did the founders want? Limited. Does that sound like limited government? No. Would you pay for a WPA circus with the strongest woman in the world? It's like, get a job, right? I mean, that dude, what is he doing? That's not a job. I mean, well, again, what's the point of having, this is where you got to get past just numbers. What's the point of an economy? To produce wealth. Is this wealth?
No.
And as a matter of fact, the sad reality of the waste, it's supposed to be going to workers, this money, right? But we later find out only about 59% of that money in the WPA actually went to the workers. The rest went to paying administrators, overhead. So it's no surprise that a liberal magazine, not a conservative thing that they didn't really agree with the founders, okay, called the New Republic. Here's what they said about the WPA: a wretched failure. That's what we ought to do. The last of the WPA projects weren't eliminated until halfway through World War II, middle of 1943. The stupefying roster of wasteful spending generated by these programs represented what we need to see here. It's not economically productive. These are politically motivated and economically counterproductive purposes. So where we see that idea of priming the pump fails is that you are, what we need to grasp is that you are actually, remember priming the pump, they said we're getting the economy going, but really you're not creating wealth, you're diverting wealth. What does divert mean? Yeah, so like you got a river that's going this way, and then you channel it over here, you change the direction of it, you're diverting it. So you're not creating wealth that otherwise wouldn't exist. When the government takes people's money, does the government have its own money? You know what I'm saying? When the government takes from productive citizens and spends on something they wouldn't buy, you're not creating wealth, you're diverting it. Here's an analogy. Let's say you got a burglar, okay, a thief. By the way, I am not necessarily saying that the government is a thief. I didn't say that. Okay, so the government, or excuse me, the thief is going through these houses, stealing, takes their money, goes to the mall, and spends. He stimulated the economy in the mall. All these jobs, they're creating stuff. Okay, was that creating wealth? Is that thief adding to the wealth of society, adding to useful production. He's just what? Not creating, diverting. You with me? Economists today must still battle this magical thinking as if we just got to move numbers around to get things going. Now, in their defense, the guys who call for pump priming, okay, today they're called Keynesians. Why is it that? Who does that sound like? Yeah, that guy, John Maynard Keynes. Okay. In their defense, this is actually Keynes met FDR and said FDR's got no clue. Guess who Keynes actually thought had a better idea what's going on? Hoover. Okay. So in their defense, Keynes said you're not really doing what I call for. And they would, the Keynesians would say, even if there is waste, if it gets the economy going, it's worth it. So I'm not getting all into Keynesian. And like the guy today, who's the most famous Keynesian, Paul Krugman, writes in the New York Times. I disagree with him. I think he's deceptive in his writing. And there's actually if you want more on that, about the state of Keynesianism today, check out Thomas Woods and Robert Murphy have a podcast questioning what Krugman does every day. So you get a PhD in history, a PhD in econ, questioning Krugman. I couldn't go toe-to-toe with Krugman every day, but so I'll just say, in their defense, for the Keynesians, they would say, did even Keynesians like the NRA with all these regulations and stuff? Did Keynesians like increasing taxes? No. They would be about priming the pump, but they would say he didn't do enough of it. I'll just leave that debate aside, because remember, even when you disagree with somebody, you want to give them the best argument possible and then defeat it, right? We just don't have time to get into all that. So I'll just say, go check out, if you want to hear more, Tom Woods and Bob Murphy, if you want more critique of the most famous pump primer today, would be called Get Proven. Oh, by the way, you know what he said? He said, did I mention this yesterday? I can't remember. If this is what it takes to get the economy going, hey, I'm okay with, for example, faking an alien invasion, right? And then think of what that would do. We'd get all of these, you say, oh, the aliens are coming, and then we got to create an alien defense fund and get all these people going, creating things to stop the aliens, and then they would have jobs and be able to buy stuff. And he said, I'd rather do stuff that really we need, but if that's what it takes to get the economy going, okay. Okay, so what is wealth? What is the only way we find what is real wealth? How do entrepreneurs know? How do we get wealth creation and not wealth diversion? Yep. What people buy. How do you know what people are buying? Prices, right? Prices and the profit system, like we saw with the robber barons, right? They want to make customers happy. That's how you produce real wealth. Okay? And all these unnecessary things we'll keep getting more of these. For example, later in the century, we'll get the National Endowment of the Arts, that will create, for example, the Piss Christ. Anybody heard of the Piss Christ? Okay. Some guy, supposedly an artist, took a crucifix and placed it in a jar of urine and labeled that art. Now, if I said, I don't want to pay for that, they would say, oh, censorship, you fascist. Some guy with a man bun is going to come and, man bun and a whiskey beard, you're going to come attack me for being a fascist. No offense, man bun people. But some social justice warriors are going to call me a fascist for not wanting to pay for art and that censorship. Is that censorship when I say I don't want to pay for it? Censorship is what? Yeah, when I outlaw it. If you want to create a Piss Christ, I'm not throwing you in jail. But the thing is, this was tax dollars paying for it. Your parents paid for that, the Piss Christ. Okay? Now, he actually, I think what he said is he was not trying to attack Christianity, if I understand correctly. He was trying to attack the misuse of religion. Does religion get misused? Yes, it does. So, okay, whatever. That's not how I'd like to go about doing it. About trying to make that message. Or how about this one? How about another piece of, quote, art paid for by taxpayers, where you have to walk on the American flag to see the, quote, art? Do you want to pay for that? No. Right? So all these things, this is how we get a lot of creation stuff people don't really want is when it's taken out of the hands of the price system where consumers decide and put in the hands of government officials. So let's see an example of the magical thinking of those who dislike the free market. Here's another example, Marxist professors. You'll see Frances Fox Pippins, famous Marxist professor, and you get to pay for this, your parents. She's a Marxist. By the way, any of you plan on paying, like somebody says, I'm a Marxist, I want to go talk about how horrible everything America stands for is? She could say, I don't hate America, I just think it's oppressive, and we need to completely change it and make it Marxist. Do you want to pay for that? No. Okay, well, you do. You pay for that, okay? But also, so, by the way, here she is sneaking into a, quote, sit-in where they're, like, being so brave and raging against the machine or something. But you see in the window, I believe that's her daughter up there. She really thought this was dangerous. Would she have her daughter there? This is virtue signaling, people. This is, if you're a college professor, you want to seem brave, act like you're raging against the machine. You're so brave. But you know they're not going to be violent against you. Hey, you know what? Go try that in North Korea. Try that in Saudi Arabia. That would be brave. Yeah. It's kind of like, you know, you ever go to a Muslim bakery and ask them to make a cake for the homosexual wedding? No, they go to the Christians because Christians aren't going to do anything about it. Like they make a piss Christ, but they're not drawing a picture of Muhammad. Okay? Yeah, so brave. Okay? Not that I want people making fun of Islam. I don't want to make fun of Islam, but I just show, you know, does it really take a lot of guts to make fun of Christianity, to rage against America, whatever. Anyway, so following the thinking of so many of her Marxist predecessors, she says things like, you know, under socialism, here's the thing, you can do work you find meaningful, right? You're not going to be oppressed by capitalist system to do unmeaning, you know, work without meaning. And I forget it was Marx or Engels said, you know what, you could do something every day in a Marxist utopia. When we get to workers' utopia, right? The workers take over. You know, one day you want to sit down and write poetry. Okay. Next day maybe you want to go be a cowboy and rustle cattle. Okay. Maybe next day you want to be a farmer. Maybe next day you want to. So you really think that's what's going to happen once we get rid of the oppressive capitalist system? Then you would have meaningful work. But all of that leads me to ask the question. Okay. If you are doing things you find meaningful, well, what would you rather do? What would you know? Okay, let's go with that suggestion. Let's go write some poetry. Okay, on the beach. Wouldn't you find that meaningful?
Yeah.
Or would you rather, I don't know, change the snow tires on a garbage truck in a blizzard? Which would you choose, right? Or maybe would you like to clean out the inside of a sewage plant? Now here's the problem. Listen, y'all, here's the problem. You see the contrast. What is the point of jobs, people? To create wealth. I'm sorry, I don't want your poetry. No offense. There are very few people whose poetry I find it worthwhile to read. Not many people. Now, is it wealth for me, though, if somebody picks up the trash? Is it wealth for me if the sewage isn't backing up in the building? Is it wealth for me if somebody makes steel that goes through a car? You're in the hot place where all that steel is made. It's a dangerous situation. It's hot and uncomfortable. Is that if the electric the power lines snap in the winter? Is it wealth for me if some guy gets up in a bucket in the freezing wind and restarts the power lines? Yeah, that's all wealth for me, right? So the problem is what I would pay for, that's wealth. This other stuff in a socialist utopia, some guy sitting on a beach writing poetry, or those living newspapers, right? Or 350 ways of cooking spinach. I don't want to pay for that. That's not wealth. But you take it out of the free market and somebody's getting paid for it. See, if we're not creating wealth, we're poor. You with me? And see, that's what if you want one test for society, it's the porta potty test. I came up with that. What's the porta potty test? How are you going to get people to clean the porta potties? Yeah. Now, in a free society, what's the only way you can get people to do unpleasant jobs? In a free society, pay them more, right? Okay, the bottom right. That's from that show. You know what show that's from? Dirty jobs, right? And what's his point? He says these guys, they love their jobs. It's meaningful. They feel like they're doing something important, right? We got to pay them. You got to pay them. You got to pay somebody to clean out the porta potties, to pick up the garbage, right? Okay. If you don't have a free society, you don't have the free market, right? What do prices do? Send signals. So what signal is getting people to pick up trash? What is the price for labor? What's it called? Wages. What's happening to wages? If not a whole bunch of people want to do the stuff, the supply of workers for those dirty jobs is not high. But the demand is high because we need that stuff done. So what's going to happen to wages? Automatically sends the signals. But if you don't have those signals and you don't have those built-in incentives, how are you going to get people to do the dirty jobs? Guns. Guns. Point guns at them and make them do stuff. Solzhenitsyn, during the Soviet Union, he wrote a book called The Gulag Archipelago. Gulag is where they put prisoners, political prisoners, right? And so they had a whole separate society of people who were enemies of the state, who were slave labor. We didn't hear much about it. So you check out the wrong, I'm not making this up, check out the wrong book from the library, you're an enemy of the state, and you go as a slave laborer to Siberia. Okay? Now, how about, we had slavery, right? The West had slavery, right? West Indies, when they got rid of slavery, the opponents of abolition said, we were right, look, the sugar industry collapsed. Well, why did it collapse? Because slavery was covering the real costs of producing sugar. Why? Because who was bearing the cost? They didn't put a lot of money. The slaves were bearing the costs. With me? But if you have freedom, and by the way, communism is a giant, turn the whole country into a giant slave camp. Okay? If you have freedom, like we did in America, why do we have technology in America? Why do we have so much technology? Because what is technology? Labor-saving devices, right? And so why did we have to have labor-saving devices in America? Because we had free labor. And so what were wages in America? High. That forced bosses to bring in technology to save money. Remember Lincoln? Lincoln had problems with race. Remember, did Lincoln always think blacks and whites were equal in their abilities? No. But is that what really mattered? No, because he believed they were equal in something much more important. What's that? And the right to keep what they produced. You with me? And that's what's going to empower them and make sure their wages go up. Okay. So I'd rather have someone working the sewage system than creating poetry that most people would create. And the free market is going to make sure that gets done. And by the way, anybody heard of the wage gap? What's that? The gap between men and women, what they make? Why is there a wage gap? It's because America's sexist? No. In your entire life, have you ever once, when you see somebody up in that bucket in the freezing rain and wind, working on high-powered power lines, has it ever once been a woman? I have never seen a woman. Now, is that because those power companies are sexist and women are trying to get those jobs? Say, no, get out of here, woman. Do you think they would love it, love it if a woman wanted that job, because they would take pictures of her and she'd be on the front of all of their ads. Look at how equal opportunity we are. Oh my gosh, we're wonderful. Oh my. Rainbows, magical fairies everywhere. It's like, look at this, yay, we're wonderful. Okay, but guess what? Women generally don't want to do that. Okay, some would say they're smart, right? They send the men out to do that. The men go, right? And the women say, hey, there you go, honey. Thank you. Go to work today. There you go. That's called civilization. Remember Jamestown, right? How do you get men not to go bull fight and drink all day, but instead to go clean out sewage plants and fix high-power women? And also that makes sure they take a shower after the sewage plant. Women. Okay. So that's how it works. But Frances Fox Pippins, she would be fuming right now if she heard what I was saying, so she'd be fighting against that. Okay. Yes, Louder with Crowder. Yeah. Okay, now, most of the New Deal agencies would eventually go away. But one in particular is going to change America forever. All of them will break precedents, and we're going to talk about that, how they change the way America looks at government. But one of them is not only going to change the way we think, it's going to stick around and last forever, and it's a big problem. more of this still today based on magical thinking. Social Security. Social Security is a Ponzi scheme. Anybody know what a Ponzi scheme is? Anybody? Well, who's ever heard the phrase Ponzi scheme? Okay. Yeah, it's
Kind of like a scam.
it is a scam. It's named after Guy Ponzi, right? Who? How does it work? Okay, so I get one guy in. Okay, I get Ibrahim in as my first investor. Now, I promise him great returns. How am I going to get good returns for him? Now, if it's real growth and it's not a scam, how do I get Ibrahim good profits? I take his money and I do what with it? How? How do I grow it? Invest in what? Yeah. So, for example, give it to Henry Ford. Yes, he's an anti-Semite. Who cares? As long as he doesn't have government power, right? Let him have his stupid ideas. As long as he has no power to inflict those stupid ideas on everybody else. What's the only way in a free market Henry Ford can get your money? Is he gives you something more, you want more than your money, right? So I take Ibrahim's money, and I give it to Henry Ford. He buys a conveyor belt. His workers produce a whole lot of cars. They sell so many cars to make lots of money. Some of it goes back to Ibrahim. You with me? But that's not a scheme. That's not a scam. That's real. Okay? But in a Ponzi scheme, where do I get the money? I get you guys. You six right here. You invest with me, and I keep a lot of it, and I get a whole bunch of it. Ibrahim, he just made 20%. He said, sweet. And you guys are like, awesome. He made 20%. Now, so you see, the first guy, just one person, I need 6 people to support it. Okay? Well, how am I going to get you guys money? I got to get in. I got to get to the next level. And then how am I going to get money for those guys? Even more. This cannot work. This cannot work. There's not enough people, but you'd have to keep exponentially growing how many people we have on the planet. You with me? Now, how is Social Security a Ponzi scheme? Well, when we first got started, why did they have 65 as the retirement age? Because most people died before that. So you're not getting any money. You pay in, and then you don't get any money, right? Well, what starts happening? What's this say? What does that mean? Read the title. What does it mean? What's a Social Security recipient? Getting Social Security. How many workers are working and sending money to a Social Security recipient, right? Okay, so we started out, people are dying, okay, and they're having lots of babies. And especially one thing that helped is the baby boom, right? Because after World War II, well, during World War II, the men and women were separate, the men were all fighting the war. After World War II, they get together, babies. Okay, so you get a whole bunch of babies, and then those babies, when they can grow up, they can support people who aren't working. By the way, how does Social Security work? Is it we take your money and invest it, and later when you retire, we take that's you know what? President Bush Jr. He said maybe we can do a little bit of that with Social Security. What happened to him? He got attacked, big time. You hate old people, right? He's gambling with your investments. Okay. Instead, we want a Ponzi scheme with our investment. Okay. So what happens as we're not having as many babies and people are living longer, the baby boomers are about to retire. And who's going to pay for how does Social Security really work? It's not their money, it's whose money? Your money. Young people. Why you? Because you don't vote. You're too busy partying. Right? Old people, we got nothing else to do. I want my money. Right? And so all these old retired baby boomers, okay, they want their money and they're going to vote. And what do we call a politician who tries to do something about that? Unelected. Actually, Paul Ryan said, maybe this is not sustainable. Maybe we need to do something about it. They literally made a commercial of Paul Ryan pushing Granny off the cliff in a wheelchair. That's called, remember, demagoguery. But it works. It works.
I don't work.
Okay, so here's how it works, y'all. Look, this is what's going on with Social Security. Okay, early on, and by the way, the first person who got Social Security, she paid in 1 month and then got paid back the rest of her life. Is that going to work forever? So early on, you got all these workers supporting that one retired person. They don't have to give that much for them to have plenty, right? But now where are we? Oh boy, is that going to work? Y'all know what I'm talking about with Greece? Have y'all heard what's going on with Greece? Greece is collapsing because they promised their people these really lush retirement benefits, and you can retire really early, but they're not having babies in Europe. Okay? And guess what? Eventually, that's us. And because are we going to do anything about it? Are we going to try to solve this before it's too late? What do you call a politician who tries to solve this before it's too late? Elected. Do people want to hear the truth? No. Okay, there was one politician who said this isn't going to work. He ran for president. He went to a retirement home called Goldwater. He went to a retirement home and said, I'm going to get rid of Social Security. People say, oh, I want to hear the truth. Tell me what you really believe. Stop lying to us. He did. He got annihilated. He got crushed. Because LBJ said, oh, no, we're going to give you everything and fight a big war at the same time. It'll work. Trust me. Okay. And it did work. He got elected. Okay. So, conclusion on the New Deal's effectiveness. Was it the inherent instability of capitalism? The New Deal saved us from capitalism's built-in failings? It was, on the contrary, mistaken government policies that created the Depression and kept it going on. It was, remember that? The trade destruction wrought by tariffs. Not that kind of wall. Okay. It was those incentive destroying taxes. Did y'all see? Were you watching? Did y'all see the vacuum? Okay, there we go. Vacuum up the tariff. So he's not sending the money to his workers. What else was it? Look. It was those oppressive, meaningless controls on production and competition. It was, that's a cow upside down falling on it. It was the senseless destruction of crops and cattle. It was the coercive labor laws that stopped entrepreneurs from getting the economy to recover. By the way, look at the screen. You're never going to hear this again. Who? No, that's Mussolini up in the dream. Mussolini, who came up with fascism, who came up with the term fascism, right? Okay. By the way, that cow, I cut it out of the earlier picture. The guy's about to shoot the cow. He's on his head.
You're done, dude. We're going to have steak tonight.
Hashtag Green Trust. Oh, but there's smart people running all this. You guys are just a bunch of rednecks from flyover country. What do you know?
You don't know, you don't lie no more.
Do you have a PhD?
No.
Those guys have PhDs. Sit down and do what you're better
I
tell
can
you to
shoot
do.
the air.
Okay. And read this. Was it government spending? Here is the Secretary of the Treasury. Read this quote. FDR's own Secretary of the Treasury. What did he have to say at the end? So what do we have to show for this?
Nothing.
Well, we got something to show. A debt.
Big old.
Oh, now think about what's the problem with a debt? And so, what are we supposed to do with savings? Pour it into technology. But now instead, we've got to pay off the debt, which is going to make us less productive in the future. So we're just taking a giant hickory stick and smacking the next generation. We're taking their wealth they should invest in and using that for a huge debt to invest in stupid things. And we're making them pay Social Security for old people. Okay? And by the way, he says, look, we tried it for 8 years. It's not like they haven't had enough time. This isn't some hardcore capitalist who hates who hates the government. That is his own Secretary of the Treasury. Okay, what is this? Look up here, y'all. Okay, what is gross domestic product? What I'm trying to tell you, what do people often say got us out of World War II? I said it was not. I mean, got us out of the Great Depression. It wasn't. I'm saying it wasn't. It's World War II. People say World War II got us out of the Great Depression. And again, if I give you an option, Amanda, if I give you an option, would you rather have a war or a depression? I'd rather have a depression. Now, the GDP grows to the total things produced in our domestic economy, GDP. Everything we produce, right? So that's the line, is everything, including what the government buys. What are the bars? Private, okay? That's real wealth. So if you buy a car for yourself, which would that go into? The bars. It would add to the total GDP too, right? But it will be included in the bars. Now, what do we notice? People say, oh, look, this got the economy going. And that's what they like to say. Look at GDP. And look at all the jobs. Well, look, what is starting right here? World War II. World War II. But now, what's the difference? Look at this. The middle of World War II, we have not even gotten back to where we were in 1901. We're not even as rich as we were 14 years ago. Is that progress? Well, then what's all this? Look up here. What's this difference? Well, if you made a tank, where would that go? Would that be one of the bars? No. How about a bomber? How about a flame? Stop and think about the word flamethrower. This is horrible. What's a flamethrower do? No, seriously. It burns someone alive. Would you rather have?
It shoots straight fire.
Would you rather have people? Try to take it seriously, y'all. This is the real world. We're really doing this. Okay. Would you rather have somebody burned alive, or would you rather have somebody standing in a soup line? You know what I'm saying? And think about it. Why during World War II are we talking about rationing? What is rationing? Limiting how much you can have. So you want a car? Well, no, you can't get a car. You want to use gas? Well, you only get so much gas. You have to pay money, but you also have to have a ration ticket. Make sure you don't use too much. Clothes, food. Why do we have to ration? Because there's so little of it. Why? Because everybody who's working is producing stuff that is not wealth. Are you better off when the government creates a tank? No. That doesn't make you happier. You with me? Now, just like I said, if you build a bridge because we need a bridge, we're better off. If you build a bridge to create a job, we're not better off. You with me? If you build a tank because if you don't, the Nazis and the Japanese imperialists are going to take over. Okay, we needed to do it. War is bad. This is another example, but sometimes necessary. But notice, I'm not saying we should or shouldn't get into war. I'm saying don't say the war is a good in itself because it's good for the economy. Does that make sense? Tanks, bombers, battleships are not wealth. They protect wealth. These are something we need so we don't have another rape of Nanking. Have I described the rape of Nanking before? When Japan is conquering China and they invade Nanking, a city, they murder, I think it's hundreds of thousands of people. Is that right, Steve? A lot of people get murdered. You get women and little boys being raped. They say, we're going to see how many live bodies one bullet can go through. We're going to use live humans for bayonet practice. How do you stop evil like that? You got to kill Japanese soldiers. Okay, we need bombers. Okay? The Nazis, the Holocaust, the way you stop the Holocaust is not being nice to Nazis and not making them afraid. The way you stop the Nazis is kill Nazis. So we need tanks, we need bombers. You with me? But what I'm talking about, when it comes to war, I'm not going to tell you go to war, don't go to war. I'm going to say treat this like adults. This is the real world. This is not a game. If we need it, let's do it. But it's not a good in itself. You with me? Bombers, tanks, artillery, those protect wealth, they're not wealth. So if we have more than we need, we're wasting wealth. Problem is, it's not always easy to know when we need more or less. All I'm saying here, it's not a good in itself. That is not what. You see what I'm trying to get at? Did World War II get us out of the Great Depression? No, it did not. If it did, then why are we rationing? Okay? And again, this is another example. Talk about pump priming. That's a lot of spending. Did it get the economy going? No, another example that pump priming does not save us. Okay. So when did we finally get out of the Great Depression? We finally got out of the Great Depression. Basically, look at when does private GDP grow? After World War II is over. FDR dies. It's kind of what it took. I hate to say it. FDR dies. Truman takes over, and Truman isn't as anti-business, and then we don't need and he's got a Republican Congress, forces him to stop spending so much government money, and we don't have to be spend all that money on World War II. And now that's when we get real growth. You with me? Look at how you know what's so angry? Think of how much waste we're never getting that back. Those decades of non-growth, we will always be poor because of that. You ever hear that saying, hey, where's my jetpack? They said in the 1950s, I have a jetpack and a flying car. Where are they? You know why you don't have a jetpack and a flying car? One word. Yes. Government. Yes. That's why you don't have all that, because the government took your stuff. They took the wealth we could have used to produce stuff we needed and wasted it on hiring people to chase birds with balloons, on WPA circuses,
Hey, that's very useful.
on bridges we don't need. Okay. Okay, so long-term effects of the New Deal. And for this, we're going to refer to that article I had you read by Larry Arnn, Professor Arnn, the head of Hillsdale College. By the way, Hillsdale is the only college in America that takes no money from the government. Why do they take no money from the government? Because if the government gives them money, exactly, the government's going to control what they do in a second. And now, often the government's going to control people by saying we want to make sure all the races are treated equally. Okay, and but Hillsdale, you know what? They can say, "Oh, shut up! I've been there, done that." You know what Hillsdale was started? Hillsdale, when they were founded, was one of the leading abolitionist colleges. They said, "Don't tell us about treating the races equal. We were way ahead of all of you." Okay, so they just don't want the American government telling them what to do, and this is really deeply connected to our topic, because the long-term effect of the government, right? When we first got America started, what type of government did the founders want? Yeah, limited. Okay, so according to that article I had you read called Economic Bill of Rights. Now remember that? Okay. So who likes the Bill of Rights? I got one person who likes the bill. 2, 3, 4. So the rest of you all, what, you're a bunch of fascists? Who likes the Bill of Rights? Come on. Okay. So, but now FDR comes up with a new bill. Oh yeah, we got those bills, but now we've got an economic Bill of Rights. That should scare you. Here's what. Let's look at the difference between ideas of rights the founders had and FDR had. Okay? And that's going to be the most important. The main thing about the New Deal is not just that it ruined the economy and kept it bad. It's also the precedent it's going to set for government and our rights. So, according to the Economic Bill of Rights, that article, what job must the government begin with? What's the government's first job? Why property? Because
Foundation of liberty.
exactly. What was the War for Independence about? Tell me, what's the rallying cry of the War for Independence? What is taxation doing? Taking away your money. What do we call someone who creates property and it's taken from them and they have no say? That's a slave. You with me? And the founders said, we're going to create a government. Its job is going to be to protect our property. And so the government originally was designed to protect our property and what else? Our rights. Okay? But they had a different view of rights. The founders had a negative view of rights. Now, does that mean bad? Negative is bad? How is that different than a positive view of rights? If it's negative, I want the government. What does the government have to do to my rights if it's a negative view of rights? Does the government need to give you a church for you to have freedom of religion? What does it need to do? Leave me alone, right? The Bill of Rights is a giant no trespassing zone on our rights. Just stay away. It's negative. Government, stay away. Leave us alone. Does that make sense? That's what the founders had in mind for rights. Limited government. It was just there to protect your property, and then we got to keep the government away from our rights. Limit the government to keep it away from our rights. So then FDR comes up with a new Bill of Rights, which is compelling because it lists all these good, even vital things like food, education, okay, medical care. But how do these differ? The old Bill of Rights did not demand anything of anyone else except for their recognition. Think about it. For me to have religious freedom, do you have to do anything? What do you have to do for me to have it? Just leave me alone. You with me? But let's keep going with that. Describe the harmony that the understanding the founders had and built better than the Bill of Rights. How does that breed harmony in our society? When I get something that I'm entitled to, it doesn't take anything from you. So we can live together in peace. Okay? But if I've got a right to something positive, like, okay, let's take an example. Medicine. Let's say I'm the government. Okay? Let's say Fabio has a right to health care. Okay? Okay. And let's say Ibrahim is the doctor. Okay? Now, Ibrahim, you're the doctor, and we have just declared that he has a right to health care. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, look at me for a second. We've already said this. Does health care is wealth, right? Does that just exist? Where's it come from? Somebody must provide it, produce it, right? So who produces it? Doctors. So if he's got a right to health care, then the government has to provide that right. The government doesn't have health care. Where's the government going to get health care? From the doctor. The government is going to come force you to give health care to him. Does that make sense? Now, it's going to be a little more concealed because what's going to happen, we're going to pay you, although we say we're going to set the rates, and you may not be happy with the rates, okay? But we're going to tax other people and give it to you, so it doesn't look like the government's controlling people because they're off doing their other job. We just take money. What are you, greedy? You don't want to pay taxes? You greedy and selfish? Okay? Because, of course, there's no greedy people in the government, right? Hashtag Transcontinental Railroad corruption. Remember that? Transcontinental Railroad, all that corruption built in. That's right. Okay, so we're going to take your money, give it to the doctor for him to have health care, which means we are forcing you to work for another person. That's involuntary servitude. You think? So when I am forced, so what's happening now, and by the way, Cuba, they decided to let some people go a couple years ago. Such a paradise that they will use violence to keep people in. They said, we're letting people go, but we're not letting doctors go, right? Because, well, we give them their education, and they owe it to these other people to have the right to health care. Which, that's understandable, the government pays for their education, but the thing is, that was the only place you could get an education. You didn't have another option. So when the government, you see how it's inevitably going to be more and more controlling. When we guarantee people all these things, like right to education, right to housing, right to all these things, somebody else is going to be forced to provide it. You see why that's scary? Okay? That's why, did I tell you about when I met Justice Ginsburg, Ruth Bader Ginsburg? Met all these government teachers when I was in the James Madison Scholarship at Georgetown. They had all these other government teachers. And in the picture afterwards, everybody's smiling except for Mr. Rhodes, right? Because I'm not a fan. But anyway, during the Arab Spring, when the Arabs were saying, hey, we're going to have freedom, and so Egyptians came to Ruth Bader Ginsburg and said, do you have any advice for us on creating a constitution? She said, well, don't look at the American Constitution. This is your Supreme Court justice. Don't look to the American Constitution. Look to the Egyptian Constitution. I mean the South African Constitution. You know why? Because it's got more rights guaranteed in the Constitution. And which, of course, so led me to ask her the question. Okay, well, that leads to the question: how do you protect liberty? Do you protect? What you tell me? How did the founders say we would protect liberty? But was it mainly by giving a long list of rights? Is that the main way you protect liberty? Remember the Bill of Rights. What was the metaphor we used earlier in the year? They're the lifeboat. When everything else fails, at least we got this backup. Okay. What was the main way the founders said we're going to protect your rights? By doing what? Limit the government. So I said, do we mainly protect rights by limiting the government or by listing rights? And guess what she said? She didn't answer the question. And it's not that she's too stupid to get the question. She's way smarter than all of us combined, okay? But she didn't answer my question. She definitely does not have the founder's view of rights. Okay. So, well, given that, okay, given that it's the founders' system was negative, what system did they establish that provides more of these items and gives us liberty under the law? The answer's right there in the key to the word. Constitutional government, where government is limited and people have the right to provide all these other things for themselves, called the free market. But here's what happens when we set, remember, before now, we had limited government. And you provide things for yourself. But now, once we broke, that's what the New Deal set a what? Precedent for bigger government. Set a precedent for bigger government. That's going to be the long-term effect. And it is not innocuous. You know what innocuous means? It doesn't really hurt, no big deal. Okay? Here's the effect of this new view of what the government ought to do. This growing power of the government. Right there. That's what it is. Remember Mussolini, everything inside of the state, nothing outside of the state? And so here's a notorious example. This nice grandmother, right, florist, who had homosexual customers, and she had no problem. She knew they were homosexuals. I think she may have had homosexuals working for her, no problem with that. But then two homosexuals came and said, we want you to provide the flowers for our wedding. We want you to provide the flowers for our wedding. And she said, well, I can't do that. It goes against my beliefs. Right? In a free country, what would happen? She'd be allowed to practice her religion, right? But I got news for y'all. Religious freedom is not paramount now. Now it's the sexual revolution. Religious freedom must always bow to the sexual revolution. Okay? And so they were not satisfied. No, we're not going to let you do your own thing with your own florist shop.
You shouldn't worry, they're not going to shoot her. They're going to miss.
We're sending in.
They're going to miss.
So you know what happened to her? They brought the government. They sicked the government on her. Okay, and she's going to lose her retirement, her house, everything, because she has a different view of marriage. Does she hate homosexuals? Is she a homophobe? Which I guess should mean fear of homosexuals. Right? Phobia? No. She just disagrees. What's the thing she disagrees on? The definition of marriage. Right? She's got a religious view of it. You could just go natural law, even if you don't believe in God. The idea that marriage is encouraging the bond between a man and a woman when they have procreated sex. And it's nothing against homosexuals. They just can't do procreative sex. So when I say you can't get married, it's not like I'm going to hunt you down and stop you. You just 1 + 1 do not equal 3. I don't need a law to enforce that. It's just how it is. And so two men cannot consummate the marriage. Remember, it used to be you got married, it wasn't real until you had procreative sex. You kissed, that's not good enough. Because procreative sex creates another life. And that's what we said society has an interest in. Because once you create a life, you bring another life in there, and we want to encourage more when we get in the sexual revolution. We want to encourage you to stay together. That's what marriage is. Your community comes around and says, you two stick together to take care of this new life. Two men cannot have sex in a way that creates a new life. Your body can breathe on its own. It can circulate blood on its own. It can digest food on its own. There's only one thing, one biological function that requires two bodies. That's procreation. Two men are not equipped to do that. Two women aren't equipped to do that. So how are two women going to consummate their marriage? They can't. Does that mean I have to send the cops after them? No. And so, but even if she didn't have that, even if it's just her religious beliefs, even if she's wrong, well, limited government will let her be wrong. Are you telling me there's not another florist shop in the northwest of America they could have gotten flowers? No. So they say, oh, it's like the Jim Crow when blacks couldn't. No, it's completely different. Because then blacks couldn't find a place to stay in a hotel. No, you could find a florist. It's rainbow fascism. That's what it is. Okay. And by the way, notice all these rainbow fascists who go to protest and they say, oh, they call Antifa. They go and protest these people. Like, I think one time there was even is in San Diego, and these guys, I think, may have been like white supremacists or something. And so they come and they say, we're going to shout you down. They come armed with bags of rocks and poles with knives on the end. And they said, we're going to prevent you from talking. Okay, who's the fascist? Right? They prevent Milo Yiannopoulos from talking. They prevent other guys. Some guys who, they're just controversial. They're definitely not white supremacists. We know they're not white supremacists, but they're going to shut them down, pepper spray them, riot. Okay? Who's the fascist? Fascist does not just mean anybody I don't like. Fascist used to have a meaning, right? And if you say we're not going to let you have freedom of speech and we're going to have the government control all things, that's fascism. Now, somebody who says I want limited government doesn't want the government providing these things. They may be wrong and stupid, but they're the opposite of fascism. The opposite of fascism is not social justice warriors. The opposite of fascism is what? What was this country founded on? Fascism is government controlling everything, right? What's the opposite of that? Limited government. You know what the opposite of fascism is? The Constitution as originally understood. That we kicked out on the road, that we kicked out when we brought in the Economic Bill of Rights. Yeah. 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 Right. Right. And you know, where I got the phrase rainbow fascist is I saw these guys a couple different places. Another place, a reporter was trying to film these guys, and they didn't want him there. They attacked him, tried to take away his microphone, camera, right? Okay, who hates freedom of speech? Fascists. And what was ironic? You know what I saw kept popping up? Rainbow flags. That's where I came up with rainbow fascists. Now, does this mean all homosexuals hate freedom and limited government? Milo Yiannopoulos. I'm not a fan of Milo Yiannopoulos because he's like tweeted some horrible stuff. So I'm not a fan. Yeah. I'm not a fan of Milo Yiannopoulos, but Milo Yiannopoulos, the reason he likes getting the attention, but also he's trying to bring attention to squashing freedom of speech. There are plenty of homosexuals out there. Peter Thiel. Anybody know who Peter Thiel is? He's a big hotshot in Silicon Valley. He's for limited government, and he's homosexual. There are plenty of homosexuals who want limited government. Okay, you ever heard of the Pink Pistols? They want gun rights. Okay, you want to go beat up on a homosexual? Well, they pull a gun on you, and you're not going to beat up on them. Okay, so there are plenty of homosexuals. This is not, oh, he hates homosexuals because he teaches in a Christian school. This is just talking about the reality of how we protect liberty. Okay, then if we think of a long-term impact of the New Deal, continuing with that, what's a welfare state? Where the government has responsibility to look out for the well-being of its citizens. How do you think the founders would have viewed the idea of a welfare state? What type of government did they want? Limited. Then, let's look at the Constitution. With the New Deal, the first time we got the federal government giving money to individuals. Bobby. Papa, you with me? There you go. Okay. So, now welfare, the Constitution, the preamble actually has welfare in it. But I underlined in the handout as a key I gave you, I underlined the wrong thing. The Constitution, you see where I am, permits the government to promote the, I should, instead of welfare, I should have underlined the what type of welfare. Look what it says. What's it? Promote the what?
General welfare.
General welfare. What does that mean?
All around.
Public goods. Classic liberalism is not no government at all. It's the government provides something that everybody could benefit. So you could make an argument for the transcontinental railroads, which I think was a flaming failure of a catastrophe. But at least you could make an argument for being constitutional, okay? Because everybody could benefit. How about if we get a military? Does everybody benefit from them? If we don't start unnecessary wars, could everybody benefit from the military, the whole country? Okay, if the Nazis didn't conquer us, right? Everybody in here benefit from not living under the Nazis? You with me? That's general, right? I don't give money directly to you. I hire a military that kills Nazis, and everybody benefits from that. You with me? That's general welfare. Even if we said transcontinental railroads, theory, everybody benefits, still think it's a bad idea. But at least you could say that's general welfare. But when I give a check to you, is that general welfare? What is that? That's individual. You with me? See how that's different? Okay. But where did I get the property to give to you? Yeah, I took it from somebody else. And what's going to happen in democracy once we pick up on that? We're going to tax? No, we love it. We're going to elect people to take money from other people and give it to us. And so we're taking people's property. What's the foundation of liberty? Property. Okay. The government, with the New Deal, it broke the ice. It overcame that old precedent of limited government. We didn't want the government coming in and rescuing us. We thought people should take care of themselves. The government, now that's not there anymore. That old precedent. And by the way, transgender bathrooms, right? The Anti-Federalists saw this coming. You know what? And remember who the Anti-Federalists were? They feared the Constitution. Okay, one of them said, "Watch out! The government's going to be everywhere. It's going to be watching us in our homes. It's going to be watching us at work. It's going to be following the women into their bathrooms." And we're like, "Oh, come on. Guess what? Wait a minute. They foresaw transgender bathrooms." Yeah, right. Okay. But the ice has now been broken. The precedent has been set. Once we do something, we're used to doing it, and we could do it again. You know what that phrase, break the ice, get used to it? Like, who in here is their oldest sibling in the family? Right? You notice that your parents are not as hard on the younger kids as they are on you? Right. Because when you're the first kid, we freak out. I'm sorry. You come talk to me when you're in your 40s, and then you'll say, okay, I get it. We freak out. Okay, but then by the time you know what the older ones do, you guys just wear us down, and by the time the next one comes up, we're like, whatever, right? Okay, so you guys.
You're the youngest. I'm the youngest, and that's not how it works.
Okay. So once you get the standard, once you get the routine going, you're afraid the person, but then after that, we can do it more often. Once we're used to that precedent, we're going to do it more often. That's the long-term effect of the New Deal. So the long-term effect created the foundation for a welfare state, overcoming our society's traditional attachment to what type of government? Limited government, and the Constitution's encouragement of what type of welfare? General, as opposed to individual. Yeah. You with me? And so here is our future. The inevitable result of a departure from limited government will bring us this. So, especially once you add in the myth of wall of separation. By the way, y'all know the Borg are, right? Y'all know the Borg from Star Trek, okay? Resistance is futile, okay? So, what's the wall of separation? You've got to keep your beliefs to yourself, right? So once the government takes more and more of your property to create more and more institutions it controls, and adds to that, wherever government is, no beliefs are allowed. Well, guess what? Who's got beliefs? Everybody. So what beliefs do we end up kicking out? Religious beliefs. Everybody else gets to bring theirs in. You with me? And these are not things you can prove. For example, in one case, the Supreme Court is going to say the government shall neither advance nor inhibit religion. Sounds like they're trying to be neutral, right? Not encourage, not prevent. It's just stay out of it. Well, guess what? You have a scientific experiment proving that's okay? No. You have that position on faith. You have a faith position on faith. You know what? My religion says I'm going to advance the kingdom of Jesus Christ in everything I do. So if you tell me I can't, that's a different religion. You with me? You seize my property. And by the way, is the government just asking? Now, if you say, I don't want to give you the property, just send the cops. You say, I'm not coming to jail. They will shoot you. You understand what I'm saying? Behind every government action is the veiled threat of violence. That's government. It's a monopoly on violence. Only government legally has the right to use violence. So when they say, we're taking all your property, or this much of it, right? There's a whole bunch of people who would like to send their kids to a Christian school, but they've lost so much of their property and have to pay taxes, and other places where they go to buy stuff have to pay taxes too. They don't have enough money left over to create on their own a school, so they got to go to the school the government creates, and then the government says, no religion out here, we're creating a religion vacuum. But that itself is a religion. You can't prove with science that that's how things ought to be. To say, we're not going to talk about God, either for or against, does science prove that that's the right approach? You with me? And if you go through through much of your life not even talking about God, eventually God will seem unreal. What is his name? Charles Graham Sumner, the guy who came up with the some of these guys kind of mixed up, but he came up with the idea of social Darwinism. I actually like some of his economics, but he said, he wasn't a Christian. He said, but when I went into my academic career, I put my religion in a drawer. And then several years later, I opened the drawer, it wasn't there. If you treat the world as if you don't need God to make sense of it, right? Which, by the way, I think is self-destructive, but philosophically, but we're not going to get into it right now. You start to become somebody you've got a new worldview. And that's going to change the way you look at the world, eventually change your beliefs. So we are right now, when we take this government growing and we mix with it wall of separation, we are establishing a religion. What is establishment? Using government dollars to create an alternate reality. You see what I'm getting at? The more power they have, we've broken the ice. Now we have government controlling people. Here's what I foresee. I foresee this. You go to church, and then your pastor preaches homosexuality is a sin. By the way, if you think homosexuality isn't a sin, it's fine. I mean, I'm not saying it is or isn't. I believe the Bible. I have an interpretation of the Bible that says it is. There are some people who say they're Christians and don't have a problem with homosexuality. I'm not getting into that right now. I'm talking about how the government works. Okay? Your pastor preaches homosexuality is a sin. I foresee a day when that's a hate crime, and he goes to jail. Now, you can say, what? That's crazy. That never happened in America. 5 years ago, would anybody have believed you if you said the government's going to come in and say you got to let a boy go in a girl's bathroom? Would anybody have believed you if you said we're going to have the head of education in the state telling the parents we're going to let a boy sleep in your girl's hotel room, and we're not going to tell you it happens because that boy has decided he's a girl, and you've got no right to know about it? Would anybody have believed you? But it's happening now, right? And by the way, how did the central government get the power to tell all the states what to do about transgender bathrooms and all this other stuff? Did they have to point guns at anybody? They just threatened to take away their money, right? But where does the government have money? No, where's the government money? Get money. You guys. You with me? You see how this works? They seize the power. They seize the property. They've got the power. They use it to control what you can think. And if they say, oh, that would never happen, they can't say that anymore. Radicals just can't say, oh, you're exaggerating. You can't exaggerate anymore with them. Whatever you think might happen, I could see them doing it because they have. When they were trying to get the Equal Rights Amendment passed in the 1970s, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, I was just talking about her a second ago, she wasn't a Supreme Court justice, but she said, you know what some people predicted? Transgender bathrooms. They said this is going to get rid of gender distinctions if we pass the ERA. And you're going to have the same sex, you have bathrooms without sexes. And people, you know what they said? oh, you're just ad hominem, you're just attacking us, making up silly stuff that nobody would ever do to try to make us look bad. Guess what? It came to pass. So once we've got this precedent set, who knows where we're going from there? I don't. Do you? Is this a way to protect freedom? The founders knew what they were doing, but we threw that out the window. And a big step of throwing it out the window was the New Deal. Remember the progressives? How did they feel about the Constitution? They didn't like it. And what is the New Deal? The New Deal is progressivism on steroids. More power to the government. Okay. Any questions?